Chapter 1124. Here comes the ship, guys. Get moving. Somebody raised his arms and yelled. Oh, oh, oh. The clansmen of the Fishbone clan swarmed to the dock and began to work. Some were responsible for fixing the mooring ropes, and some were responsible for building the gangplank. Although it looked like a mess, there was no delay in their work. As long as they did not board the ship, they were as good as experienced sailors. It was hard to imagine that a year and a half ago, these people had barely seen the sea, let alone done such a thing. Soon, all the supplies on the ship were moved away. Somebody, they said, we can ship the goods now. Red goods or black goods, and how many barrels of each? Have you asked them? Don't worry, I've memorized them all. Okay, let's get started. Goods was a commonly used abbreviation. The entire Endless Cape produced only one kind of goods, Styx River black water. However, as the mining area expanded, the Sand Nation found that it had more than one color. In the other two underground valleys, there was dark red water and dark green water from the Styx River. They were also flammable, but had different properties and smells. Therefore, for convenience, people began to use goods instead of black water, which soon spread among northerners. This was the fourth time somebody had worked at the festive harbor. He remembered that when he first set foot on this barren desert, his first thought was that if he could survive, he must get as far away from this place as possible after 3 months. However, beyond his imagination, a city had gradually taken root in the southernmost part of the desert. If the recovery of the oasis was a miracle, then the festive harbor was a miracle. The reason why the Endless Cape became a place of exile was because it had nothing but danger. Even the most experienced hunter could not survive alone. To the Sand Nation, only the 3 gods were capable of building a city that could accommodate hundreds or even thousands of people. He had thought that the chief, who had underestimated the power of the desert, would completely give up this ridiculous idea after his attempt failed. However, he did not expect that the Sand Nation, who had lived here for hundreds of years, knew nothing about the desert. The Endless Cape wasn't completely empty. It was just that they had never realized it. The first problem to be overcome was the water source. The northern official named Concrete led them to build an endless reservoir, which was covered with a black membrane. At first, they did not see anything strange about it, but when the months of demons ended, the people of the Sand Nation found that the sun could really separate the white salt from the seawater. The water vapor condensed into dew on the thin film, and then flowed along the inclined surface into the pipe groove, and finally into the storage tank. The more intense the sunlight, the faster the water would be stored. Although a pond could not produce much fresh water, when hundreds of ponds were added together, the amount of water would be considerable. Now, such reservoirs were still being expanded. Not only could they meet the needs of the Sand Nation, but they could also supply the ships of Neverwinter. This completely overturned the stereotype of the Sand Nation of the Majin clan. Secondly, there was the problem of housing. It was impossible to rely on a tent to withstand the midday sun. The closer it was to summer, the more difficult it would be. If there was no reliable place to hide from the heat, even if there was water, it would not last long. It was said that the stone of the Iron Sand City came from the southernmost region before the desertification. This was also the reason why there were so many oases on the Silver Stream but only one city. However, the northerners still used local materials. They built furnaces and used black water as fuel. They filled the furnaces with silt fished out from the bottom of the sea and filtered fine yellow sand to make bricks. Since there was an endless supply of raw materials, the festive harbor soon had a batch of brick bungalows with double-layered walls and ceilings. Although it was not as good as the oases under the shade of the trees, it was still a stable shelter. Finally, there was food. Elder Thuram of the Osha clan commanded everyone to set up dozens of fishing nets on the beach. Every time the tide rose, the nets would be completely swallowed up by the seawater, and when the tide ebbed, a large number of strange prey such as crabs, sea snakes, sea urchins, and so on would appear in the square formed by the fishing nets. At first, Simbadi did not dare to eat these strange food, but under the threat of Thuram's whip, he had to bite the bullet and obey. He was surprised to find that the food tasted good. Although the staple foods still had to be transported from Neverwinter, the food they had was much better than a year and a half ago. Simbadi's attitude gradually changed after he had enough food and shelter. When the 3-month assignment was over, he chose to continue working in the festive harbor, which surprised even himself. After all, the salary here was much higher than in the port of Clearwater. Of course, he had another reason. After the last boat was filled, the busy day came to an end. Simbadi, thank you for your hard work today. See you tomorrow morning, brother. I want to go to the market later. Do you want to go with me? Simbadi had become the nominal leader of the Fishbone clan because of his participation in the assignment. Whenever there was a task, he would be the first person Thuram would look for. In the face of such a change, he was really flattered. When he was still in the Silver Stream Oasis, he was an inconspicuous member of the clan. Not to mention being in charge of any affairs, there were not many people who were willing to talk to him. But now, not only did the younger generation treat him as a leader, but some girls even extended a hand to him. Not only was he grateful to the great chieftain, he also felt a little proud. However, Simbadi did not accept those invitations. Because he already had someone in his heart. Hey, wait for me, Simbadi. When he was about to leave the dock to find Molly, he heard a familiar voice. Simbadi could not help smiling. He turned around with a smile, but his expression suddenly froze. It was indeed Molly, the girl with long black braids. She was the only girl in the clan who did not dislike him. After Carlone, the favored one, left the dispatch team, Molly did not choose to quit, which was one of the main reasons why he persisted. Simbadi thought he might have a chance, but now he saw Molly holding a man's hand and running towards him. And that man was not a Majin clan man. Molly, you, and he. Simbadi stammered. Ah. Molly suddenly noticed that they were holding hands. She hurriedly loosened her grip and smiled embarrassedly. I was in a hurry to bring him to you, so I dragged him all the way here. Is that so? Phew, this lady is really strong. The man gasped. I couldn't stop even if I wanted to. It was as if I was being pulled by a bull. The Iron Zen nation of the Majin clan lives up to its name. He looked Simbadi up and down. Let me introduce myself. I'm Rex, and I come from the fjords across the sea. I know you're from the fjords, Simbadi said, standing in front of Molly warily. I don't have any relics to take back. You can go now. The festive harbor had been developing steadily, gradually expanding its territory and population. However, the past 3 months had completely broken the calm. The Endless Cape seemed to have become a popular shipping route overnight. A large number of fjords ships appeared in this new harbor city, bringing a series of troubles. These islanders, who claimed to be explorers, either dug holes or bought all kinds of strange things from the dispatch team. For a time, the festive harbor was in chaos. That's right, their swarming had indeed made this place extremely lively, and the gradually forming market was also quite popular with the Majins. In this way, everyone could use their salary to buy things they liked, instead of having to wait until they returned to the port of Clearwater to spend it. But what was more impressive was a series of negative news. For example, an explorer who wanted to explore the Styx River fell into the valley, and no one knew whether he was dead or alive. In the end, it was the Majin clan who cleaned up the mess and rescued him. Another example was that some explorers bought suspicious stones and metal utensils from the Majin clan, but they used counterfeit money, which almost led to a violent conflict between the two sides. The most outrageous thing was that they even tried to steal the source of life in the festive harbor. As they coveted the strange membrane used for the cisterns, the roofs of several cisterns were missing. This incident eventually alerted the First Army, who arrested the criminals and sent them directly to Neverwinter. It was said that what awaited them was a lifetime of mine labor. Simbadi was wary of the fjord's people because of the endless troubles that kept coming. Chapter 1125. Ha! Simbadi twitched the corner of his mouth. You don't like to take shortcuts and reap without sowing? Most of the small clans had heard of the fjord's people. Not all of them were good at sailing, but almost all of them were natural-born businessmen who would not get up early without making a profit. Many Mahjins in Iron Sand City had been cheated by Rex, so all the Mahjins knew that they had to be very careful when talking to them. What happened in the festive harbor further proved this saying. Simbadi did not believe a single word of Rex's. Are you done? I have something else to do. You can find someone else to prove your innocence. Simbadi winked at Molly, signaling her to go with him. Wait! Rex shouted hurriedly. It's not free. I'm willing to pay you with a golden dragon, no matter what you get in the end. Simbadi, just let him finish. Moody also grabbed Simbadi's hand. I think the things he made are very interesting. He's not like an ordinary liar. Feeling the warmth from Moody's palm, Simbadi's heart skipped a beat. But 10 golden dragon. As long as you tell me the specific location, I'll give you 10 golden dragon. Rex probably wanted to prove that he was not lying. He took out a golden dragon and put it in front of Simbadi. This is the deposit. If you can help me to the end, I'm willing to pay you 20 more. What do you think? Simbadi was a little surprised. It was rare for a fjord person to pay before seeing the goods, let alone 30 golden dragon. After a quick calculation, he realized that it was a huge sum of money. If he only relied on his salary, he would not be able to save that much money in 10 years. I also want to buy some new clothes for the children in my clan. Molly said, blinking her big watery eyes. Simbadi was finally defeated by Rex's double attack. Okay, I see. If you dare to lie to us, then you won't lose anything. Rex flicked the golden dragon to Simbadi. You can get a golden dragon just by saying a few words. There's no better deal than this. Sure enough, Fjord's people were good at bewitching people. Simbadi caught the gold coin and asked, What do you want to know from me? Why is Muriel with you? What do you mean by writing the name? You have to start from the beginning. Rex cleared his throat. Let's talk as we go. First of all, what's your impression of the sea? Impression? He hesitated for a moment. The mother of the 3 gods, the birthplace of all things, and temperamental. I think it's mysterious, Molly said excitedly. No one knows how wide it is or how deep it is. Even many areas in the southernmost region have not been explored yet. If it's the sea, I'm afraid it can't be explored in 1,000 years. You're both right. But for Fjord's people, it's more like a treasure house, Rex said with a smile. Rex said with a smile, countless treasures are placed quietly on the seabed. There are boxes of gold dragons and silver royals, as well as lost ancient relics. They are not hidden at all, and they are just waiting for people to pick them up. It's not surprising that they can get rich overnight. That's why it's said that whoever owns this treasury will become the richest person in the world. That's easy to say, Simbadi said disdainfully. Unobstructed. The sea itself is the biggest barrier. You're not a fish. How can you go to the bottom of the sea at will? Yes, that's the problem. Rex said excitedly. The purpose of the Society of Wondrous Crafts is to make the impossible possible. This time, I want to prove to everyone that the Society of Wondrous Crafts is not a crazy organization, nor a guild of cowards. Although we're not explorers, we're no less useful than them, no, we're even more useful than them. I don't quite understand what you're saying, a great invention, the Fjord's man said eagerly. I call it the diving suit. With it, people can stay at the bottom of the sea for a long time like fish. What? Simbadi asked in surprise. When I was picking up shells, I did see them stay underwater for a long time, far longer than an average person can hold their breath, Molly added. That's why I asked them what they were doing. So it was Molly who approached them first. Simbadi's heart ached. I was also surprised at that time. After all, it's said that Sand Nation people always keep a respectful distance from the sea, Rex said. These days, I've been carrying out diving experiments and the results are very successful. There's no doubt that it'll change the whole fishing world. It'll turn a job that only depends on luck into a new adventure that everyone can participate in. Since you've succeeded, why did you come to me? Simbadi asked in puzzlement. Ahem, here's the thing, Mr. Simbadi. The only thing that the diving suit lacks is fame. This time, King Wimbledon's reward is the best opportunity, so I need to fish out some real treasures before others do, the kind that can attract the attention of the King of Greycastle, Rex said, clenching his fists. Rex clenched his fists and said, once I get the honorary title from His Majesty, there will definitely be countless people lining up to buy my invention. The Fjords man paused for a moment. But we don't know where the treasure is most likely to be hidden. His Majesty didn't specify what he wanted in the recruitment notice. He only said that anything that looks strange would be fine. Obviously, there weren't many treasures that could interest His Majesty, and he definitely wouldn't be interested in the junk that we dug out from the sandpits and corals. Therefore, we couldn't come up with a good idea and could only search along the coastline. Just then, Miss Molly brought us a ray of hope. She said that you once saw a strange water hole, and on a moonless night, you could even see a trace of light shining from the bottom of the water. I want to know where it is. In other words, the chief is the main reason that attracted these fjords people here, Simbadi thought with a headache. I've seen it by chance. It's at the bottom of a cliff, and the entrance can only be vaguely seen when the tide is low. But even so, it's dozens of feet deep from the sea, and no one knows how deep it is or what's in it. Maybe it's just an ordinary cave, and the light comes from a group of jellyfish. Don't worry. Even if we don't find anything, I'll pay you according to our agreement, Rex replied. As they spoke, the three of them arrived at an uninhabited beach outside the harbor. However, at this moment, the beach was surrounded by a group of people. These are the sailors I recruited. They have nothing to do with the experiment and mainly do odd jobs, Rex said. There are only two people who really help me, Eyepatch and Tall Hat. They're both my assistants and members of the Society of Wondrous Crafts. What a strange name. Simbadi thought as he glanced at the man and the woman in the middle of the crowd. His eyes finally fell on a strange suit in front of them. It had a huge metal helmet, which looked very incongruous with its body. Its clothes and pants seemed to be fused together, which made it difficult to wear. The most eye-catching thing was the two tubes sticking out of the helmet. They looked like the erect tentacles on the head of a shrimp, but were extremely long. The terminals of the tubes were connected to a large black machine. Simbadi had seen the same thing on a ship in Neverwinter. The sailors called it a steam engine. That's what you said. Chapter 11:26. 3 days later. Simbadi rose slowly from the sea in a hanging basket. How do you feel? As soon as Simbadi took off his heavy helmet, Molly came up to him excitedly. Is the underwater world interesting? It was not much better than the desert. Although there were many strange animals and plants, it was better to have nothing at all. Every time he sank into the sea, he felt like he was being swallowed by the pressure. The omnipresent pressure made it difficult for him to move and even breathe. Simbadi thought so, but when he saw Molly's expectant eyes, he swallowed his words and said, how should I put it, the scenery is beautiful. That's great. If only I could go down and have a look, Molly sighed. Looking into her big light brown eyes, Simbadi suddenly remembered that a year and a half ago, when his clansmen set out from the port of Clearwater to the southern end of the desert, she had the same look on her face when she was on the stone boat. In such an unfamiliar environment, she could still spare some energy to comfort him, which made her look like a freak among the panic-stricken crowd. Simbadi did not know why, but he felt a little uneasy. Well done, your performance really surprised me. Rex was the next one to be hoisted out of the water. He clapped his hands and walked down from the basket. Balance, air intake, calmness, sense of direction, all the qualities required for diving are so outstanding. Is this the innate talent of the Sand Nation, or is this what you're good at? I don't mean to offend you, but when I was chatting with Miss Molly, she mentioned that you're not a strong warrior in your clan. Molly stuck her tongue out at Simbadi and turned to chat with her assistant. There's a pool in the oasis where the Fishbone clan lives. When we were kids, we liked to compete to see who could dive deeper, so I'm not completely inexperienced. Simbadi said helplessly. But she's right. I'm not the best in the clan. If Carlone was here, he might be able to do it in one day. Carlone? Who's that? He's the strongest among the younger generation. Whether it's hunting or fighting, he's not inferior to his peers in the big clans. But he only participated in one dispatch team, so he should be working in the port of Clearwater now. It's too late to find him. Really? Rex shrugged. I don't think so. Not necessarily what? He's better than you. The Fjords man took off his diving suit bit by bit. If you want to go deep into the sea, technique isn't the most important thing. The first thing you need is an open heart. An open heart? Simbadi was surprised. Accept the unknown and overcome yourself. This is the difference between a pond and the ocean. He looked in the direction of the festive harbor. Incredible changes are happening here. That Carlone you mentioned only came here once. He's far behind you in this regard. If I were to find him, I probably wouldn't be able to convince him to put on a diving suit and go into the water. Simbadi rolled his eyes at him. If Molly hadn't said she wanted to try it herself, I wouldn't have agreed. He had planned to lead them to the water cave, take the 10 gold royals, and then leave. As for this group of people, they could do whatever they wanted with them. However, he did not expect that Molly had already become so interested in the strange device. When she learned that they needed a helper for the salvage work, she raised her hand almost immediately. Simbadi had no choice but to agree to help the Society of Wondrous Crafts to the end and follow Rex into the water cave. He did not trust Molly to take the risk before he confirmed the safety of the diving suit, let alone with a Fjords man. Although he knew she would have to go into the water one day, at least the risk would be much lower. Ha ha ha, Rex laughed carelessly. But you've finally crossed the boundary and taken a step into a new field, haven't you? Maybe that's why Molly likes to get along with you. Wait, what did you say? What? Haven't you noticed? He spread out his hands. When I was chatting with that girl, your name came up a lot. She said you were a timid kid and often cried when you were beaten, but you were very curious. However, you became more restrained and quiet after you grew up. Simbadi twitched the corner of his mouth and said, she really tells you everything. I guess it's easier for outsiders to talk about it, Rex said with a grin. I don't really understand the customs of the Sand Nation. Maybe personal strength is important, but maybe you've always underestimated yourself. You know nothing, Simbadi snorted in a low voice. Although he said so, he did not really resent Rex. In fact, even he found it incredible that he had become so familiar with a Fjords man in just a few days. At first, he had been reluctant to stay and help Rex because he did not want to see Molly alone. On second thought, Simbadi found that there was not a trace of disdain in Roland's words and actions. Roland was surprisingly easy to get along with. Compared with the arrogant nobles of the Northern Kingdom or the merchants of the fjords, this was very unusual. Probably because of this, Molly would visit the camp of the Society of Wondrous Crafts whenever she had time. After a moment of hesitation, he asked Rex this question. Why? Rex said after a moment's thought. There's no special reason. Because we've tasted enough discrimination and contempt. Tasted enough? Simbadi was stunned. Since Rex can promise 30 golden dragons in one go, he must have a high social status, right? But where does the contempt come from? Before Simbadi could ask further, an assistant came over and said, Sir, the equipment has been tested. We can dive at any time. How about it? Rex looked at him. Diving is no stranger to you, right? Simbadi had to suppress his doubts. As long as there's nothing wrong with the gadgets you made. Of course. I've been studying it for almost 10 years. In order to make sure nothing goes wrong, I've invested almost all my money in it. What? Ahem, ahem, ahem. No, nothing. Don't mind me. Rex turned his head away. In that case, I announce that we'll enter the water cave after noon and start our first exploration. The reason for choosing noon was simple. Since the air duct could meet the depth requirement, ensuring a good view was the top priority for diving. At this time, the sun was right above the cliff, almost shining directly into the sea. The seabed was more than 50 meters deep, not to mention the water cave halfway up the cliff. If they waited until the tide ebbed in the evening, it would be easy to get lost. I'll wait for you at the entrance. Rex put on his helmet and gave a thumbs up. Then he entered the basket and dived into the sea. About 15 minutes later, the assistant nodded to Simbadi and said, "It's your turn." Simbadi took a deep breath and put on the heavy helmet. Molly stepped forward and fastened the helmet for him. Then she said loudly against the helmet, "Come on, I'll wait for you here." He gave her a deep look and turned to walk to the basket. With the roar of the steam engine, Simbadi slid down bit by bit. The surging blue sea was getting closer and closer to him, gradually occupying his entire field of vision. For a moment, he had the illusion that he was not falling, but that the sea had taken the initiative to meet him and wanted to swallow him whole. A familiar sense of fear reappeared in his heart. But it only lasted for less than a breath's time before he recovered. Accept the unknown and overcome yourself. Besides Molly's sparkling eyes, Rex's words also appeared in his mind. Simbadi sighed and accepted the embrace of the sea. In an instant, the whole world turned into a clear blue. Sunlight sprinkled down from above like countless swimming golden snakes. After slowly descending for 20 meters, the basket stopped moving. Chapter 11:27. Rex, who had been waiting here for a long time, stretched out 2 fingers and pointed to the top of his head and then to the depths of the cave. Simbadi gestured that he understood. Rex nodded, turned around, and walked into the cave. Simbadi raised his head and stared at the air duct suspended above Rex's head. During the 3 days of walking underwater, he had not only familiarized himself with the basic operation of the diving suit, but also learned sign language and the details of diving. The most important thing was to keep an eye on the condition of the 2 air ducts, which was one of the reasons why 2 people were needed for the salvage operation. The other end of the tube was connected to an air pump driven by a steam engine, which pumped air in and out at the same time to maintain a smooth flow of air in the helmet. No matter which tube was damaged or blocked, the consequences would be unimaginable. Therefore, they had to pay special attention when crossing complex terrain and changing directions. Seeing that there was no obstacle at the top of the cave that could threaten the air duct, Simbadi also jumped into the cave. The sound of the waves subsided, and he could clearly hear the hissing sound of the air duct and his own heartbeat. After about 10 meters, the light became dimmer and dimmer. Looking at Rex's blurry back, Simbadi felt that he was walking into an abyss. Just then, the ground under his feet suddenly rose and turned from a flat road to a gentle slope. In less than 7 minutes, Simbadi saw the surface of the sea again. It was no longer shining with golden light, but as quiet as the night. As Rex slowly emerged from the water, Simbadi held his breath. A huge cave appeared in front of them. Half of the cave's outline was hidden in the darkness, and only a small area of the dome was illuminated by the light from the sea, revealing a shimmering blue surface. This cave is actually a passage connecting the inside and outside? Simbadi struggled to climb ashore and was about to take off his helmet, when Rex stopped him. The fjord's man took out a waterproof oil lamp from his waist bag, lit the wick, and observed for a while before taking off his helmet. Phew, it seems that this is not a dead place. Is there wind? Simbadi felt a slight chill on his cheeks as he took off his helmet. Yes, there's probably another exit in the cave, Rex said excitedly. In this case, it's more likely that we'll find treasures here. We're really lucky. Simbadi was not interested in finding anything valuable. He was more concerned about the safety of the cave. Who would have thought that there would be a hollow terrain under the desert? This was beyond common sense. They could not have dived more than 20 meters deep. Even if there was a rock layer, it would not be too thick. How could the loose sand support such a large cave? Would the dome collapse? These questions made him feel slightly uneasy. I'd better report this discovery to Greycastle when I get out of here, Simbadi thought. Although he felt sorry for the Society of Wondrous Crafts, they were not far from the festive harbor and he did not want any accidents to happen. The wind seems to be coming from that direction. Rex placed his helmet by the pool, picked up the oil lamp, and said, "Let's go take a look." Simbadi unsheathed his saber and followed them. However, as he explored deeper, he felt that the cave was getting stranger and stranger. It did not take long for the rocks under their feet to turn into soft soil, and then clusters of green grass replaced the slippery moss. It was as if they were not underground, but in the silver stream oasis. "I can't believe there are green plants here," Rex exclaimed. "I thought there were only mushrooms and moss in the dark underground." "How about, we go back first," Simbadi said hesitantly. "I feel that this place..." Halfway through his sentence, he suddenly froze. "What's wrong with this place?" Rex looked back after a long silence. "Huh? What are you looking at, a flower?" Simbadi felt his breath quicken. There was a beautiful little flower by his feet. Its petals were light purple and its leaves were as thin as a cicada's wings, as if they would break at the slightest touch. "This is the flower of gods." "Is it very rare?" "No. It used to be everywhere," Simbadi said in a low voice. "I haven't seen it with my own eyes, but according to the legends about the three gods' emissaries, this flower can be found everywhere along the coast, like a purple ribbon. It's also the most gorgeous flower sea in the southernmost region." "There's a flower sea in the desert?" Rex asked in surprise. "It's said that a long time ago, this place was not a desert. Instead, it was covered with trees, grasslands, and rivers, just like the north." He shook his head. "But after the three gods' emissaries left, the earth gradually turned into sand and became what it is today. But that's not what I want to talk about. According to the legends, the flower of gods can't be moved once it takes root. That's why there's no flower sea in the oasis. It should have gone extinct a long time ago." "I see," the fjords man said, smacking his lips. The fjords man smacked his lips. "Perhaps it's because the desertification didn't affect the underground cavern that the flower of god angels happened to be rooted here and survived." "Is that true?" Simbadi's strange feeling grew stronger. For some reason, walking in this dim world, he felt like he was walking in an oasis. The purple flowers around him grew denser and denser, as if they did not grow in the ground by chance. Just when he was hesitating whether to move forward, he suddenly heard a light crack under his feet. Then, a soft light bloomed from the soil, illuminating the area within a radius of several meters. "What's going on?" Rex asked in surprise. I seem to have stepped on something," Simbadi said, swallowing hard. "It looks like a plank. Is it a trap?" He hurriedly bent down and brushed away the flowers and grass by his feet. "This is, ha, ha ha, ha ha ha." Hearing the laughter echoing in the cave, Simbadi felt goosebumps all over his body. "What's so funny?" "Hey, tell me what it is first." "Ha ha ha, it's a treasure. We've found a treasure," Rex said excitedly. "Look." When he brushed away all the soil, Simbadi was surprised to see that the light came from the thing under his feet. It was a stone tablet, half buried in the ground. There were countless lines on it, which were as dense as fingerprints. With his feet as the center, the light shot out in all directions, causing the tablet to look like white jade in contrast. Although it looked hard, it felt like rotten wood, which would sink a little with the slightest force. It was completely beyond the scope of common sense. What was more incredible was that once he moved his feet away, the surface of the tablet would gradually return to its original state, and the light would dissipate, as if everything he had just seen was an illusion. Is there a treasure more amazing than this? Rex said excitedly, stepping on the stone tablet. If I can offer this to the king of Greycastle, I'll definitely be awarded the title of honorary explorer. But, it's too big, somebody said awkwardly. Judging from the small part that was exposed, the stone tablet was probably larger than both of them combined. It would not be easy to move it out of the water cave. As long as we use our brains, we'll definitely find a way. Or we can find another exit of the cave. Wait. Rex suddenly stopped and said, there seems to be another stone tablet over there. Somebody followed Rex's gaze and took a few steps forward. Sure enough, he stepped on the same stone tablet. With the help of its light, more grayish-white outlines appeared in the sea of flowers. There's one here, and one there. Somebody and Rex walked along the stone tablets for dozens of meters. At first, they counted the number of stone tablets, but they soon gave up the idea. Over a short distance, the flower of gods was covered by more and more stone tablets. No matter where they stepped, there would be light. Until a huge wall appeared in front of them. Oh my God! Rex gasped. Somebody also felt a chill. He slowly raised his head. In the soft light, he could see the outline of the stone wall. They found that it was not a wall, but a hill made up of countless stone tablets. Some of them were incomplete, some were broken, but most of them were shaped like a square cuboid. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were stone tablets. However, when they were piled up in a disorderly manner, somebody had a different feeling. Chapter 11:28. I think we should go, somebody murmured after a long silence. The longer they stayed in this place, the more oppressive they felt. Even when they were at the bottom of the sea, they had never felt so uncomfortable. The soft light under their feet and the oil lamp in their hands could only illuminate an area of about 10 steps around them. Beyond that, it was pitch black. In somebody's eyes, the dim light did not bring him any comfort. Instead, it was an omen of danger. It meant that they were completely exposed in the open, but they knew nothing about the threats in the dark. In fact, until now, neither of them had seen the real edge of this cave. Go. Rex's voice trembled slightly. What are you talking about? I swear, this is definitely a wonder that even Lord Thunder has never seen. An ancient relic? No. It's a relic. The relic won't move. You can come back later, somebody said, racking his brains. Your assistant and the Society of Wondrous Crafts are all waiting for your good news. Hearing the mention of the Society of Wondrous Crafts, Rex immediately calmed down. You're right. I should bring the good news back first and share it with everyone. Then let's go. Wait. It's not easy to get here. We can't go back empty-handed. He took out a dagger from his waist bag and started to chisel a stone tablet. Don't worry. It won't take long. You put something in your pocket too. At least it can prove that we've found something. Somebody had no choice but to do as he was told. After all, Rex was his employer. Since he had accepted the job of paying 20 golden dragon, he naturally had to bear the corresponding risks. Maybe this place just looks weird, somebody comforted himself. It's a little dark, but maybe there's nothing here. Clang, clang, clang. Every time Rex swung his dagger, there was a buzzing sound like metal and stone colliding, which was particularly ear-piercing in the silent cave. Somebody also noticed that every time the dagger cut into the tablet, the point of contact would emit a much brighter light, even to the point of dazzling. He shook his head and pulled his attention back. At this time, somebody was not in the mood to cut the stone tablets. There were some odd stone tools scattered in the messy wall. They were probably tools left by movers who had decayed over time. He casually picked a few pieces and stuffed them into his waist pouch. This way, he could be considered to have completed the task given to him by the other party. Rub, rub, rub. The fjord's man was still focused on chiseling the tablet, and there were already 5 or 6 pieces of gravel the size of a fingernail in his hand. Hey, that's enough. Somebody was about to urge him again when he suddenly heard an incongruous voice. It was the same grinding sound, but it was more fragmented, as if there were several Rexes chiseling a monument. Was this an echo? No. He realized that their positions hadn't changed at all. How was it possible that there was no sound before, but now there was an echo? Rex. It's almost done. This is the last piece. Stop, give me another quarter of an hour, stop. Somebody almost roared. Rex was stunned. His dagger froze in the air, and the ear-piercing sound of collision stopped abruptly. But the fragmented sound was still there, and it seemed to be approaching them. This time, Rex also realized that something was wrong. As he stuffed the stone into his pocket, he looked around and asked, "What is that?" While he was asking, a white light suddenly appeared in the distance. Under the light, somebody saw what it was, a fully grown desert scorpion. Its pincers were as big as an arm, and its upturned tail was almost waist-high. The green tip of the needle was undoubtedly filled with venom. Without an antidote, one could only survive for a quarter of an hour at most. Damn it, the sound of the chisel must have startled it. He braced himself and put his saber in front of his chest. Step back slowly, and don't take your eyes off the scorpion. For an outstanding Majin warrior, a desert scorpion was not difficult to deal with. They were not intelligent and fast, and their poisonous stinger was not only their most threatening means of attack, but also their weakness. As long as the scorpion missed its target, its sharp saber could easily cut its stinger in half. The problem was that he was not an outstanding warrior in any way. Although he had received relevant training since childhood, he had neither participated in a joint hunting mission, nor had he fought a desert scorpion. He had to give it a try. When Rex completely disappeared behind him, somebody said softly, "Now look down. No matter what happens, don't move." I got it. After getting the answer, somebody also turned sideways. As soon as their eyes met, the desert scorpion launched an attack. Although somebody could not see it, he could hear the rapid sound of the scorpion rushing toward him. This was the desert scorpion's habit. It liked to look for opportunities during a confrontation. Once it found that its prey was distracted, it would immediately attack. Calm down. Somebody slightly bent down, put his saber on his left side, and put his right hand on the hilt. This was the Sand Nation's starting gesture. It seemed that he was not facing the enemy, but the entire right side of his body was within the range of the saber. When he heard the desert scorpion crawling, he suddenly took a step to the side and drew his saber. A dim light flashed. Before he looked back, he felt a slight resistance in his hand. It was the feeling of the blade cutting through a hollow reed. With a crisp sound, the desert scorpion's stinger was cut in half. Somebody turned his saber and stabbed it directly into the gap in the carapace behind the scorpion's head. The scorpion wobbled weakly on its hind legs and soon fell to the ground. Impressive, Rex said with relief. You're indeed a Majin warrior who lives by hunting. It's not over yet. Somebody interrupted. The sound just now didn't sound like a desert scorpion's. Where was it? Where would the enemy come from? He looked around vigilantly. This place was full of stone tablets. No matter which direction he came from, there should be light. But there was only darkness around him. Except for the top of his head. Damn it! Somebody suddenly realized his oversight. A soft light in the dark was more striking than anything else, but it was easy to ignore the new light in the already illuminated area. When somebody looked up, a black shadow had already pounced on him. The target was the fjord's man behind him. In a hurry, the only thing he could do was to turn around and kick Rex away. The desert scorpion almost brushed past Rex and landed on the ground. Somebody's instinct, which had been honed by years of training, cut the scorpion's head in half without looking at it. Phew. He let out a long sigh. Fortunately, I made it in time. Hey, are you okay? Ahem. I'm probably. However, before Rex could finish his words, More sounds came from behind the wall. At first, they could still hear the sounds, but after a few seconds, the sounds became as dense as waves. At the same time, there was a muffled roar, as if something huge was crawling toward them. Rex and Rex looked at each other and their faces turned pale. Run! Run! Somebody grabbed Rex, who was still in a daze, and ran toward the entrance of the cave. A moment later, a dazzling light burst out from behind them, illuminating the entire cave. In the increasingly bright light, somebody saw a desert scorpion of astonishing size. Its eyes were as big as dinner plates, and its carapace was as thick as a reef. These features undoubtedly indicated the identity of the newcomer. It was one of the offerings of the three gods, the giant armored scorpion that ruled the earth. Under the pressure of its huge body, the wall made of stone tablets became so bright that it was difficult to open one's eyes. So that's why. Somebody finally understood why green grass could grow everywhere in the cave, even though there was no light. He also understood why there was occasional light in the cave at night. Chapter 1129. Phew, 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 finally, here we are. Somebody felt his body relax when he saw the small pool in front of them again. Thank the three gods, thank the Son of Earth and Mother Sea, he murmured in his heart. At this moment, the cave was bright, which allowed them to escape as fast as they could. The closer they got to the sea, the more the cave shrank, like the mouth of a croc. This was probably why the giant armored scorpions did not chase after them. However, this did not mean that they were completely safe. Somebody did not forget the tide-like sound. He would not be surprised even if all the desert scorpions in the entire endless cape were here. Somebody only knew that these predators could cross the stone wall at any time, follow the smell, and tear them into pieces. Fortunately, scorpions could not swim. As long as they escaped into the sea, they would be safe. Quick, put on your helmet. Somebody grabbed the diving helmet on the ground and hurriedly put it on. However, he found that the fjord's man did not move. Hey, what are you waiting for? You, go first, Rex said in a low voice with his back facing him. Go first? Somebody was stunned. Damn it, is this guy still thinking about those glowing relics? Anger welled up in his heart. He strode forward and grabbed the man's shoulder. Are you crazy? Do you know what's going on? Somebody's words got stuck in his throat. He looked at Rex's chest in astonishment, only to see that the soft leather and intestinal membrane had been cut open, and there was blood on both sides of the cut. Your diving suit. It's broken. Rex forced a smile that was uglier than a crying face. The desert scorpion didn't stab me, but its pincers scratched my suit. The Sand Nation man fell silent. The wound on Rex's chest was not big, just a cut. However, the damage to his diving suit meant that seawater would pour into his helmet along his neck. After a while, somebody said, if we only use the air pipe. Rex shook his head with a wry smile. Unless we're very close to the water, you'll have to inhale as hard as the air pump. The two pipes had to be connected to each other to maintain balance. This was something that the other party had told him long ago. That was why she had been so hesitant when answering his question. Perhaps the people of the fjords had already realized their predicament at that time. Thunder untied his waist bag and handed it to him. This is the sample of the stone tablet. Please give it to my assistant. Tell him that I have found something as good as Lord Thunder. Somebody noticed that his fingers were trembling. Does your assistant have a spare diving suit? Only these two. From the selection of materials to the stitching, it will take at least half a year to make a set of clothes. Rex took a deep breath. It was obvious that he was trying his best to control his emotions. I know what you're thinking. In fact, I've thought of all the possible ways to get out of the cave without a diving suit. Perhaps, this is fate. Fate? The people of the Society of Wondrous Crafts can never be real explorers. He bit his lip. You'd better leave before the scorpion comes. As long as you can bring the news back, even if I can't be called an explorer, my name will definitely be known throughout the fjords along with this invention. Somebody tilted his head and looked at the pool. After a moment of silence, he said slowly, I refuse. Huh? Rex widened his eyes in disbelief. You still owe me 29 golden dragon. If you die, who am I going to ask for it? Somebody said grumpily. Only you, me, and Molly know about this agreement. I don't think your assistant will pay for it. I can tell from their clothes that they are no better than the Sand Nation people. We just don't have money now. Rex protested. To buy a steam engine from Grey Castle, we spent a little more than we expected. When the diving suit becomes famous, a lot of chambers of commerce will come to buy it. By then, we won't have to worry about money at all. But the problem is, the money has nothing to do with me, and probably won't even have anything to do with you. Somebody threw his waste bag and helmet on the ground. If you become scorpion feces, do you think people will still insist that you invented the diving suit? As long as you change your story a little, you can gain both fame and fortune. There's nothing more worthwhile than this. So, not only will I lose my 29 golden dragon, but your wish will also probably not come true. What do you want to do? Accept the unknown and overcome yourself. Somebody repeated the words in his mind and let out a long sigh. Majins don't like to be owed, nor do they like to break their promises. An agreement is an agreement, no matter whether the other party is the king of Grey Castle or the fjords people. I promise to help you to the end, right? Rex was stunned. But how are you going to? Look at the pool. He took off his waterproof suit. Don't you see that it's getting smaller? Only then did Rex notice that there was a circle of wet bluestones around the pool, which indicated that the water level was falling. The tide of the swirling sea is low, which means that the distance we need to wade through the water is getting shorter, somebody said word by word. If everything goes well, we'll be rescued as long as we swim 10 meters above the water. It's impossible to do that in the diving suit, but you might have a chance if you take off all your clothes, including the stones you've collected. Now, take off your clothes. Take off my clothes. That's right. If we want to survive until the tide is as low as possible, we have to be prepared to stop the desert scorpions, and the most effective way is to set a fire. Somebody nodded. But it's too steamy here, so flowers and plants can't be easily ignited. So we need some kindling. He pointed to the oil lamp. Grease and leather should be able to keep the fire burning for a while. Rex was silent for a long time. Don't try. It's impossible. Why? You can't tell when the tide will recede. For every meter the sea level rises, the distance through the water hole will be several times longer. If we act rashly, we'll only use up all the air in the long water hole, Rex said with a pained expression. Most importantly, I can't swim. It's ridiculous, isn't it? I'm from the fjords. Even seasickness is better than this. Because I can't swim, I can't throw myself into the sea like other people and become a real explorer. I already knew that when I was diving, somebody said calmly. What? You rely on the basket to get up and down, and you're very clumsy. Without this suit, I'm afraid you can't even get into the water. Since you know that, why do you still want to swim? Because you don't need to swim. You just need to hold your breath. It might be a little painful, and you might even lose consciousness. But as long as you don't move, I can get you out, somebody said slowly. Just by yourself? Rex asked incredulously. I've told you that there was a deep pool in the oasis I grew up in. Everyone liked to compete to see who could dive deeper and longer, somebody said, raising his head. I've never been the best in my tribe, but it's not because I've tried my best, but because I'm afraid. You're afraid? Yes, it's as deep as a giant mouth. I feel like I'll be sucked in if I dive any deeper. So I always hold my breath and pretend to be exhausted in front of everyone. Over time, even I believe it myself, somebody said, looking straight into Rex's eyes. He looked straight at Rex. You said that I've been underestimating myself. Maybe it's true. So I want to try and see what my limits are. Similarly, you can't leave if you can't swim. Are you sure that's your limit? Somebody said loudly. You really haven't underestimated yourself. Rex unconsciously clenched his fists. At least you're not afraid of the sea at all. In this respect, you're much better than me, somebody said with a smile. How about it? Do you want to have a bet with me? You're an explorer. How can you be a real explorer without taking some risks? 2 hours later, the entire cave was filled with choking smoke. The pool gradually receded into the cave, which was just enough for the two of them to hide in. The faint sound of desert scorpions crawling came from the other side of the smoke. It was like a sweeping wave. The two of them looked at each other and knew that this was the last moment. Let's go, Mr. Honorary Explorer. Somebody took a deep breath and dove into the water with Rex. The cool seawater melted into his body. It was as if he had returned to his childhood. But this time, there was no Carlone or other tribesmen by his side. Chapter 11:30. 5 days later. Rex met somebody again. In the medical center of the First Army. With him came the vivacious Majin girl. How do you feel? Muley asked, putting a bunch of seaweed on the windowsill. I couldn't find any beautiful flowers here, so I had to use this instead. But at least it's green. It's better than yellow sand, isn't it? Ah, thank you, Rex said, sitting up hurriedly. I feel much better than before. That's good. You looked terrible when you were fished out of the water. Your face was blue, your body was twitching, and you kept vomiting seawater, Muley said with a smile. After you were sent to the camp, you had a high fever. Somebody and I came here twice, but it seemed that you hadn't fully regained consciousness. Rex smiled bitterly. My body was indeed too weak. But you made it to the end and surpassed your limits, somebody said with a grin. Mr. Explorer, your desire to survive was stronger than I thought. In fact, your desire to live was stronger than I thought. When we were about to reach the surface, I almost exhausted all my strength. If you didn't hold on to me tightly, I'm afraid it would have been difficult for me to bring you out. He lifted up a corner of his shirt. Here, there are still a few bruises. Sorry, Rex said, a little embarrassed. I don't remember what happened after we got out of the cave. You must have been thinking about something at that time. That's why you didn't let go of me even though you were unconscious, right? Muley asked. Maybe. Rex nodded. Many things came to my mind before I passed out, such as my precious invention, the Society of Wondrous Crafts, and my 2 wives who were waiting for me. The atmosphere suddenly became quiet. After a long while, somebody asked tentatively, what did you say just now? 2 wives. Rex seemed to have suddenly understood. Ah, I forgot to tell you that the customs of the fjords are different. The island I live on doesn't have a limit on the number of couples. It's all voluntary. It's normal that you don't know this. I suddenly think, leaving you in the cave might have been a good choice, somebody said, twitching the corner of his mouth. I agree, Muley agreed with a serious expression. Hey, you don't have to be so heartless. Rex saw that the situation was not good, and quickly changed the topic. That relic, how is it now? Somebody immediately became serious when it came to business. The First Army has designated that area as a restricted area. No one is allowed to enter without permission. They've also set up sentry posts around the cliff, probably to guard against the giant armored scorpions. I was entrusted by them to sneak into the water cave again during the low tide period and found the pouch. His voice became lower and lower. But these things were handed over to the First Army. I'm sorry. No, you didn't do anything wrong. Rex shook his head gently after listening to the other party's explanation. Since the First Army has taken over the treatment, it's impossible for you to hide it from them. Besides, I don't think I can monopolize such a large relic. The only pity was that the 2 diving suits were destroyed. Even if the news of the success of the experiment was released, the credibility would be greatly reduced. But it can't be helped. After all, you did it to save me. Simbadi was speechless. He knew how much effort Rex had put into this project. It took him half a year to make a waterproof suit, and that was only the last 2 finished products. Rex had failed many times and wasted many materials and Golden Dragon, which could be seen from Rex's lack of funds. It was a heavy blow indeed. After a long silence, he asked in a low voice, "What are you going to do in the future?" "Go back to the fjords first, and then make a comeback," Rex answered without hesitation. Simbadi and Muley were stunned. "Why? Are you worried that I won't be able to recover from this setback?" Looking at the surprised expressions on their faces, Rex smiled. "If I didn't have this escape experience, I probably would have given up on this project." He stretched out his hand, clenched it, and then opened it again, as if he was feeling something. "But now I understand that this is not my limit. So what if I can make a waterproof suit every 6 months? It's much better than before. At least I know it will succeed." "Rex. Don't worry. In 2 years at most, I'll come back with a new diving suit," the fjords man said word by word. "When that time comes, please continue to work with me," Simbadi thought to himself. "It seems that my worries are unnecessary." Just as he was about to agree, the door was suddenly pushed open, and a man dressed like an officer walked in. "Rex? Simbadi?" He looked at the 2. "Yes, sir. What can I do for you?" Simbadi hurriedly bowed. "About your discovery, Neverwinter has given us the latest instructions." The officer nodded. "His Majesty wants to see you." "You mean, the King of Grey Castle?" "Great, great chief." The 2 exclaimed almost at the same time. They both saw the incredulity in each other's eyes. It was beyond their imagination that the news could travel back and forth between the festive harbor and the new king's city of Grey Castle in just 5 days. Generally speaking, if a superior wanted to ask for information, he could just send someone to ask for it. Since the king was taking this matter so seriously, did it mean that the discovery of the ruins was of extraordinary significance? "Yes, and His Majesty has sent a ship to pick you up. You'll arrive at the festive harbor in about 2 days, the officer said with a smile. "Until then, you can stay in the barracks and have a good rest." In Neverwinter, Grey Castle. Roland sat at his desk, reading the reports sent back from the front line. In every aspect, the torch plan was progressing smoothly. In May, the demons did not put up any resistance, and the railway line was steadily advancing toward Tequila. At this rate, the First Army would attack the ruins of the Holy City by the middle of June, which was 10 days earlier than the original schedule. Although the attack was progressing smoothly, Roland did not feel relaxed. The demons were the mortal enemy of human civilization. In the past 2 battles of divine will, the demons had won overwhelming victories and forced human beings to a corner of the Land of Dawn. Now the fertile plains was the last barrier. As long as the obelisk was erected, the red mist would cover the entire continent, and the demons should be determined to take it. Roland kept glancing between the reports and the map, hoping to find some clues, but to no avail. After the night attack, the defense of the railway station had become more complete, and the only way to destroy the encampment was to take it by force. Although it was the most likely place for a war to break out, it was also the battlefield where the First Army had the greatest advantage. If the demons chose to fight head-on, it would be a good thing. The railway line, which was hundreds of kilometers away, was the second target. In fact, it was also the place where the demons had exchanged fire, with a total of 46 incidents so far. Had it not been for these reports, he would have thought that the demons had already withdrawn from the fertile plains and only the Ministry of Construction was left to repair the railway. However, it was not easy to cut off the logistics under the protection of the armored trains, machine guns and the witches. In other words, the Torch project had been designed to deal with this problem from the very beginning. After the third, Black River, train was put into service, the reports of Devil Beast's harassment became less frequent. The last place that could be attacked, the forest station, was also the least important. As long as Leaf did not take the initiative to fight the demons, they would not be able to do much. After all, the forest station was too far from the tequila's supply line, and a small group of demons could not pose a threat to the station's fortifications. Moreover, the area around the terminal station had already been burned once, so it would be difficult for the demons to do the same thing again. As the front line continued to advance, Lightning was able to directly investigate the situation in the tequila ruins. So far, there were no signs of the demons sending more troops. Looking from the sky, even the red line behind them, which was used for supply, had become much dimmer. Chapter 1131. Roland put down the report and thought of the information revealed by Cabradabi. Enemies from the Sky-Sea realm. Is it because the demons are under too much pressure that they can't deal with the war on the fertile plains? The general staff was more inclined to believe this. After all, no matter what tricks the demons had up their sleeves, the decisive factor of the war was their strength. Although the Magic Slayer had surprised Leaf by traveling thousands of miles to the terminus of the forest, he had also exposed his ability and whereabouts. Even though he was beyond the detection range of the Magic Eye, Sylvie could still sense his magic power. Now that the flashing red star was stationed in the ruins, Sylvie would be able to sense it immediately if anything happened. To put it simply, the demons who had invaded Tequila had used up all their trump cards, and Neverwinter was still adding new ones. With sufficient money and food, the administrative office began a new round of army expansion. This time, the scope of recruitment was extended to the whole country. After the administrative unification of Greycastle, its mobilization ability had improved significantly. According to Barev's preliminary estimation, the number of soldiers offered by the various regions was likely to exceed 5,000, which was equivalent to the total number of the First Army 2 years ago. Among them, the northern region, which was managed by Carwin Kant, was the most active one. When the officials trained by the second-level city hall matured and gained full control of the territory, the number of recruits would undoubtedly increase several times. In terms of weapons, the work of replacing revolving rifles with bolt rifles was being carried out in an orderly manner. Thanks to the rapid growth of skilled workers and the improvement of craftsmanship, the large-scale replacement of the rifles was almost the same as the weapons used by the precision shooters, except for the lack of scopes. Although revolving rifles had a high firing rate, their structure meant that they had low initial speed, short range, and poor accuracy. They were more than enough to deal with the Noble Knight, but they were not good enough to deal with the Mad Demons, whose throwing distance was between 100 and 200 meters. Bolt rifles could effectively make up for this shortcoming and help the soldiers win the advantage of distance. The anti-demon grenade developed for senior demons and spider demons had also been finalized and was in the phase of mass production. This kind of simple structure and cheap materials did not have any technical obstacles. In a sense, it was even simpler than making bullets. According to the current production rate, it could completely make it in time for the decisive battle in a month. Although the First Army lacked relevant training, the ease of operation was a major feature of the grenade, which was fundamentally different from the artillery. Historically, this kind of weapon was also directly used in actual combat, receiving training and testing on the battlefield, so Roland was not worried about this aspect. On the other hand, the demons in Tequila had not changed much. Based on the amount of the red line, Agatha and Phyllis estimated that the number of demons was between 3,000 and 5,000, which might have been a great battle for the Union 400 years ago. However, for the First Army, these demons were at a disadvantage in terms of numbers. Due to the iron rule that the enemy needed the red mist to sustain their lives, it was difficult for them to conceal or deceive the enemy in terms of raw power. This was also the most important basis for the general staff to make a judgment. To be honest, Roland also felt that the general staff's judgment was credible. Battlefield inference was evidence, and there was no difference between thinking that the enemy was too weak or too strong. The only thing he could do was not to blindly command and let more professional people take charge of the front line. Maybe I'm not a commander, so I'm worried, Roland thought in a self-mocking manner. Since I can't see anything wrong, I might as well stop guessing. When the day of the decisive battle comes, everything will be revealed. Roland heaved a long sigh of relief. When he was about to rub his swollen forehead, a pair of hands pressed on his temples with just the right amount of force. He immediately felt much more relaxed. There was no need for words or thanks. This was the tacit understanding they had developed over the past 4 years, and it was also the proof that he was not fighting alone. In the past, he had always imagined that one day he could become a decadent ruling class and enjoy himself all day long. However, when he really reached this stage, his busy hours only increased, far exceeding the scope of 8 hours, and even sleeping became a kind of work. It was not that he had never complained, but he rarely stopped. Perhaps this was also one of the reasons. Of course, he was moving forward to achieve his goal. But it was also the common expectation of many people. After closing his eyes to enjoy the moment, Roland looked at another report on the table. It was about the discovery of the giant armored scorpion and the mysterious ruins. Although it had not been further confirmed, the strange relics attached to the letter were very credible. This report had aroused his great interest. According to the murals in the temple, it was not surprising that there might be traces of the ancient civilization in the Endless Cape. What surprised him was that there was such an amazing discovery so soon. The stone wall in the underwater cave reminded him of the mural where the corpses of the stickmen were piled up like a mountain. If it was a civilization from 1,000 years ago, it should have been reduced to dust. As the defeated, it was unlikely that anyone would erect a monument for them. So why were there so many steely-shaped objects? That was why he was particularly curious. All the samples obtained so far had been handed over to Celine for hazard testing. After all, their biggest enemy was the radiation race, and they could not afford to relax when it came to safety. In addition, the identity of the discoverer was also very interesting. He was not a traditional fjords merchant or explorer, but a member of the Society of Wondrous Crafts. He did not forget the pioneer who had died for flying as mentioned by Marjorie. Therefore, after receiving the news, Roland immediately ordered the garrison at the festive harbor to send the two to Neverwinter. He was really curious about this group of people. As for the giant armored scorpion, it was the least important part of the report. It was probably a hybrid demonic beast, which was why it was so huge. Since he had already won the position of chief through the holy duel, the sacrifice of the 3 gods was not important anymore. He could just leave it to the local First Army. Just then, he heard footsteps outside the door, and then the office door was pushed open with a squeak. "Is the test result out? Give it to me." Roland raised his head, but the latter half of the sentence was stuck in his throat. He thought it was a guard who brought Celine's test report, but he did not expect it to be Tilly Wimbledon. Moreover, she slightly raised her eyebrows and looked a little unhappy. Ah. The next second, Roland realized why she was here. "I have a few new bottles of chaos drinks here. Do you want to try them?" "Well, Your Majesty, we've already used this trick," Nightingale whispered in his ear. Chapter 1132. Looking at her questioning eyes, Roland thought that she was quite cute when she was blaming someone. She rarely called him brother when she was in a good mood. She would only call him brother in front of outsiders or when she was annoyed, which made people want to tease her. Ahem, no, now is not the time to think about this. He coughed lightly and pulled his thoughts back on track. The plane has not been finalized yet, so every part has to be made by Anna and Soroya. Now that the war at the front is imminent, you should know better than most people how much work they have to do. Although I've completed the blueprint a long time ago, I can't turn it into reality by myself. With the extension of the railway, the interval between the seagull and the front line had changed from 1 or 2 days to 3 or 4 days. It was not that Tilly and Vendi wanted to slack off, but a large amount of war preparation work could not be completed in a day, so there was no other way but to extend the duration of the stay. As the transport, Tilly naturally knew how hard it was for everyone. Many witches fell asleep on the seats as soon as they boarded the plane. For this reason, the seagull had even replaced the cushions and backrests with more comfortable ones. Moreover, defeating the demons and taking back the fertile plains was the most important goal at the moment. As soon as this was mentioned, her imposing manner suddenly decreased, and her body that was propped up on the desk shrank back. I also want to start the test flight early so that the air knight can be put to use. Don't worry, in fact, the plane's main body is basically completed, only some auxiliary parts have not been installed, so you just need to be patient. Wait, Tilly interrupted. The main body is completed, so it can fly without those parts, right? Roland only then realized that he had let the cat out of the bag. At this time, Princess Tilly was no longer the amateur who knew nothing about planes, so it was not easy to fool her. It's not that it can't, but it is, after all, fundamentally different from the seagull. If there is a problem, Vendy can't help fix it, and if there is a mistake, at this point, he gradually closed his mouth. Because Tilly's sparkling eyes had explained everything. He really couldn't resist such a gaze. Nightingale chuckled softly behind him. Recently, she seemed to be very happy to see him at a loss for words. After staring at each other for a long time, Roland let out a long sigh. All right, I'll inform the people at the airport to get ready. That's more like it. Tilly's raised eyebrows finally lowered, and the corners of her mouth revealed an irrepressible joy. He picked up the phone. But remember, if there is an accident during the test flight, or if you lose control, you must abandon the plane immediately. Do you understand? Of course, because planes can be rebuilt, but pilots like me are precious. Tilly crossed her arms and said proudly, that's what you think, right? Neverwinter Airport. In the beginning, it was just a simple piece of concrete with nothing but 2 runways. But now, it was a real flying training ground and the prototype of the Air Force Academy. In the enclosed flight test field, a shiny silver plane was pushed out from the hangar by workers and placed at the end of the runway. Tilly took a deep breath and said, that's specially made for me, yes. Roland nodded. The Unicorn is powered by a 5-cylinder star-shaped piston engine. The main power is provided by a 5-cylinder star-shaped piston engine. In theory, the plane can reach a speed of more than 150 kilometers per hour. Even the fastest Devil Beast can't catch up with it. As the first human-made autonomous aircraft in this era, the Unicorn looked very different from the Seagull glider. The most obvious difference was its huge head. In order to fit the engine, the nose of the plane had to abandon its aerodynamic streamline appearance and be shaped like an iron barrel, which looked like it had been shaved flat. Second was the 2-blade propeller in front of the nose, which was also missing from the Seagull. Since it was the first practical piston engine, even with a lot of reference materials, the final product was quite conservative. Since the power output was not high, the 2-blade propeller could meet the requirements. Lastly was the fuselage. Because the Unicorn was essentially a fighter, it was less than 9 meters long, almost half the length of the Seagull. The fuselage also did not need to carry passengers, so it looked quite small. However, the interior of the fuselage was much more complicated. In addition to the control system, there were also fuel tanks, fuel pipes, and other power components. There was also space for a second seat and a firepower system. Unicorn. You can come up with some good names sometimes. Tilly hurried to the biplane and quickly noticed the abnormality in the cockpit. Were the missing auxiliary parts originally installed here? There were still 2 holes where the instrument panel should have been. Even though she had never seen the actual thing, she could guess that it was not completed yet. Yes. Roland nodded. These parts are mainly used to display speed and altitude, which are the 2 most important parameters in flight. In the past, Vendy controlled the plane's attitude, so we didn't need to know these. But if we want to fly with our own strength, we must always pay attention to the changes in these 2 parameters. Don't worry. I may not know how to build a plane, but when it comes to piloting, I'm definitely the best in Greycastle. She climbed onto the plane confidently and sat in the pilot's seat. In theory, the Unicorn only had 1 more throttle valve than the Seagull, and the rest of the control levers were in the same position. Before this, Tilly had practiced on the simulator many times, so there should not be any mistakes. However, this was, after all, a brand new plane. Its weight, agility, and speed were very different from the Seagull. The mechanical system had not been fully tested, so it would not be surprising if there were any problems. This was also the reason why Roland was worried. If the plane crashed as soon as it took off, even if Tilly had extraordinary piloting skills, she might not feel anything. At first, he had wanted to build a few prototypes so that she could familiarize herself with the new body while crashing. But at this point, it was impossible for her to change her mind. "Your Majesty, everything is ready," the hangar's supervisor reported. "Let's begin." Roland turned around and left the runway. "Yes." As the order was given, 2 workers inserted a hand crank into the engine starter and started to turn it hard. "I'm testing the latest human weapon, but this scene is just like the hand-guided tractor when I was a child." Roland could not help but curse in his mind. When the time comes, he must get the battery and auxiliary motor out no matter what. Bang, 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 when the piston gradually accelerated under the influence of external force, a worker closed the pressure relief valve, and the oil in the cylinder was instantly ignited. The engine erupted with a few loud explosions, and at the same time, black smoke rose. Very soon, the sounds of explosions became one, and finally turned into a deafening roar. "I still have many ways to fly that I want to try." Roland shook his head helplessly as he looked at the back of the other party excitedly leaving. The plane did not break down at the beginning, which was already good enough. According to Tilly's ability, she should be able to quickly familiarize herself with the new characteristics of the unicorn. Besides, she could get out of the plane at any time, so there was really no need for him to keep an eye on her. "It seems that you've been abandoned." Nightingale gloated. "You talk too much." Roland rolled his eyes. "Let's go." Smiling, Nightingale grabbed him and disappeared into the mist. As soon as he returned to the castle hall, a guard came up to him. "Your Majesty, the third border city sent a message saying that the mission you assigned to us has basically been completed." "Oh." Roland raised his eyebrows. "Where's the report?" "They said that they want you to go there in person." It seemed that what the 2 people found in the festive harbor could not be explained in a few words. He thought for a moment and said, "I see. Let's go now." After entering the underground, Celine was already waiting for him in the main hall. "Your Majesty, your speculation is correct. There are indeed materials to make the Rubik's Cube in the Endless Cape." She stretched out her auxiliary tentacle and showed the 2 samples to Roland. The grayish-yellow stone on the left is very similar to the Magic Ceremony Cube. Even if it's not exactly the same, it's not far off. If there are enough of them, I can start making replicas. "Sufficient. How much is it?" "Let's try a few thousand first." Ugh. He really didn't stand on ceremony. Even if the samples weren't big, a few thousand yuan would be enough to cover the floor of a room. He thought to himself that it was imperative to excavate the Cape ruins, and the sooner the better. "I'll send someone to collect it." "What about the other one?" "The other is simply inconceivable. The first thing we can be sure of is that the light it emits does not harm the test animals at all. It seems to be just an ordinary light, and not the kind of light you are worried about." "Radioactive particles." "Exactly. Of course, we can't rule out the possibility that the radiation is so weak that it can't be detected by animals. But if that's the case, we don't have to worry about its harmfulness." Celine picked out a piece of stone tablet from the bottle on the right and put it in Roland's hand. "I asked Miss Lucia to decompose a small piece of it and found that its composition is not much different from sand." "Like sand?" Roland was surprised. "It's hard to imagine, isn't it? It just looks like a stone or a larger gravel, but it has a certain degree of flexibility and emits light when compressed. There's probably nothing weirder than this in the world." "Well." He fiddled with the sample in his hand and thought for a long time before saying, "You can't say that." "Do you know what this thing is?" "No, I just thought of something else," Roland said slowly. Since matter is a combination of elements, in addition to the elements themselves, the structure is also a major factor that affects its nature. We find it strange only because we don't know much about it. For example, the element carbon is called diamond in its tetrahedral structure and has extremely high strength. Graphite, which has a hexagonal layered structure, is so brittle that it can be broken by hand. If you tear off a layer, it becomes graphene, which has excellent electrical conductivity. But if two layers of graphene are stacked together and rotated at a slight angle, it will undergo a completely different change. It will become an insulator. When it is lowered to a certain temperature and injected with electrons, it will transform into a superconductor. From beginning to end, only one element, carbon, is performing. This is the mystery of the material. In fact, even in the later generations, the exploration of the microscopic world had only uncovered a tiny corner of it. In this dark realm that had no theoretical guidance, what people did was no different from what they did 1,000 years ago. They rearranged, combined, and explored randomly. Even the most common elements could produce shocking phenomena when they were mixed together. Perhaps the luminous stone tablet and the various coatings of Soroya were not mysterious because of magic. Chapter 1134. Do I know too little? Celine's whiskers drooped as if she was deeply touched. Indeed, the longer I stay in the Quest Society, the more I realize how little I know. Also, the books you brought back from the dream world really opened my eyes. Now that you mention it, perhaps I shouldn't describe it as incredible, because there's something more incredible than that. Oh. What is it? Us. Celine chuckled. According to the book, aren't we all made up of a bunch of elements? Carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen, and so on. We're not much different from trees. But we can cry, laugh, and think, which is much more magical than glowing. I've read that book, but it's still hard to believe. Nightingale sighed. I don't want to admit it at all, but my skin is essentially no different from rough tree bark. This is probably the secret of the structure that His Majesty was referring to. Celine looked at Roland, but he did not respond. His Majesty. Hey, what's wrong? Roland finally came to his senses. Celine, what did you say before? Are we more magical than the Steels? That's it. He felt an idea emerging in his mind. Could it be that the so-called Steels weren't placed there as a memento, but they were the matchstick men themselves? You mean? Celine sounded a little surprised. The matchstick men are the Steels. What we see are the bodies they left behind, Roland answered word by word. At the same time, he could not help but shiver. Yes, a new kind of life form, completely different from carbon-based life forms, silicon-based life forms. At first, he did not think of this, but once the idea came to his mind, not only could some of the characteristics of the glowing Steels be explained, but the murals left in the temple also had a deeper meaning. First of all, why were there so many lines on the Steels? Not only on the surface, but also on the inside. If they were all carved with tools, even Anna, who had awakened the black fire, would not be able to do it in a short period of time. Not to mention, according to the words of the discoverer, every stone tablet was carved like this. If one were to think about it from another perspective, it wouldn't be surprising if they grew on their own. Perhaps there was a continuous flow of blood in the lines. Under the pressure of the blood, the silicon oxide produced a local piezoelectric effect. These electrical signals intertwined and eventually formed thoughts. In addition, electricity could be converted into visible light through a certain mechanism, so they had the ability to communicate with the outside world. Roland couldn't help but think of the giant stickman and the lake of blood in the mural. In terms of stability, oil was naturally more suitable than water. Perhaps the biggest enemy of the stickman, the radiation people, did not worship radioactive materials for no reason. Strong radiation could interfere with electric circuits and even cause electronic devices to malfunction. This might be the source of the belief of the radiation people. Roland seemed to see a shocking picture slowly unfolding in front of him. Two completely different civilizations fought for the relics of the gods in the southernmost region. One was completely annihilated, and its blood formed the underground Styx and the strangling swamp. However, because its body did not decay, it still existed as a tombstone buried in the ground after thousands of years. The other side won, but its whereabouts were unknown. Except for the ruins in the Cage Mountain and the magic ceremony cube, it had completely disappeared. Later generations could only speculate about the history of the past based on the murals that had gone through the vicissitudes of life. This was unbelievable. The glowing steels are living beings like us. With all due respect, it's hard for me to imagine that these cubes have their own consciousness and can move freely. Do you have more evidence? Roland calmed himself down and shook his head slightly. This is just my personal speculation. The truth may be very different. From an evolutionary point of view, such a thing is almost impossible. To a large extent, what life would become depended on the environment in which it was bred. Whether it was demons or demonic beasts, they were all products of the same biosphere. But what about silicon-based life? That was a completely different path of evolution. Under the circumstance that they shared the same natural environment, there should not be two fundamentally different life forms. But according to what you said, the contents of the murals are surprisingly appropriate. Celine was silent for a moment. In this case, let's put the puzzle aside for now. I think as long as we continue to explore, we will eventually find the truth. After all, only in this way can people really grow up. That sounds reasonable. Nightingale curled her lips. This is also one of the dogmas of the Quest Society. Celine smiled. By the way, I've done some tests on the glowing steels. I wanted to use them to replace the magic stones for lighting, but the result was not ideal. It didn't work. Roland frowned. When he first received the report, the first idea that came to his mind was to replace the lamps. After all, due to the limitation of power generation, light bulbs now only existed in factories and a few surrounding areas. It would be a difficult project to popularize night lighting. If the steels could be used as lamps, it would undoubtedly bring great convenience to the people's livelihood and education in Neverwinter. It's not that it doesn't work, but it's very troublesome. Your Majesty, please take a look. Celine picked out 2 samples. Obviously, they were the fragments of the steels that had been cut twice. One was as thin as a piece of paper, and the other was as small as a piece of tofu. Celine squeezed them at the same time. 2 balls of light suddenly burst out from the auxiliary tentacles. The thin one was a little dazzling, while the thick one was as big as a magic stone. After about 10 seconds, the former suddenly dimmed and stopped glowing, while the latter lasted for half a minute. I used the same amount of strength in both of my hands. Roland immediately understood what she meant. Its brightness and duration are related to the degree of deformation and its size. That's right. Celine nodded her main tentacles. The steels can't keep glowing. The smaller they are, the faster they will go out. Although they can slowly recover, it will take a long time. If I want to use them to illuminate the entire underground hall, I'm afraid I'll have to place hundreds of complete steels and pile hundreds of kilograms of iron blocks on top of each steel. After the light is used up, I'll have to move the iron blocks down. The combination of the two will definitely be a huge object. It would be a good idea to use the steels as a fixed light source and use pulleys to lift heavy objects, although it would be quite complicated. Roland looked at the fragment that had lost its luster and fell into deep thought. The smaller the size, the easier it was to deform. However, the corresponding time of light was shockingly short. It was almost the same as a flash. Wait, a flash? Roland's eyes suddenly lit up. It might take a long time to develop the steels, but he had already thought of a very suitable use for them. This problem had been bothering the First Army for a long time, and it would become more and more obvious in the foreseeable future. But now, there seemed to be an opportunity to solve it. Chapter 1135. After leaving the third border city, Roland immediately went to the ammunition factory. Although Anna was not in Neverwinter at the moment, if his assumption was correct, this part of the modification could be completed with the existing technology. In other words, this was the only way it could be produced on a large scale. Escorted by the guards, they walked into the factory. The unprepared workers immediately knelt down. The scene was filled with surprise and excitement. Looking at the enthusiastic eyes of the workers, Roland realized that he might have been a little too impulsive. But since he was already here, he had to make the best of it and turn the experiment trip into a condolence inspection tour. When the excited workers finally returned to their posts, Roland immediately ordered the person in charge, call the most experienced foreman in the factory here. I have something I want to try out. Yes, Your Majesty. The principle of tracer bullets was not complicated. To put it simply, the solid bullet head was hollowed out and filled with a luminous agent, accelerant, and retarding gunpowder. After that, the bullet was sealed with a tail tube and aluminum foil. When the bullet was fired, the gas of the propellant would break through the foil and ignite the retarding gunpowder until the luminous agent was ignited. Finally, a bright trail was formed. In the future, with all kinds of chemical industries, this was just a matter of adding another production line. But in Neverwinter, where the industrial projects were extremely unbalanced, it was obviously a headache. The luminous agent was usually a mixture of strontium nitrate, magnesium aluminum powder, and barium peroxide. This meant that if he wanted to produce tracer bullets on a large scale, he would first have to conquer the industrial production line of these compounds. Of course, Roland was well aware of the level of the chemical industry in his territory. Even now, the Ministry of Chemical Industry could not guarantee the supply of machine gun ammunition to the First Army, let alone other industries. The person in charge quickly found a craftsman. To Roland's surprise, the craftsman was not a white-haired, trembling old man, but a young man about 25 or 26 years old. He excitedly knelt on one knee and saluted like a knight. Your Majesty, how can I help you? Roland immediately realized that Neverwinter had entered the era of mechanical production. The younger generation with better learning ability was becoming the main force of the wave of industrialization. This was also a rare scene in the handicraft workshop. The speed of technological progress had surpassed the advantage of age. In the face of new production tools, past experience was no longer applicable. Now that he thought about it, most of the busy workers in the factory were in their 20s or 30s. Considering that they were already in key positions, Greycastle's future was really worth looking forward to. Roland nodded with satisfaction. I want to add something new to the bullets. Just do as I say. His idea was very simple. Since the stone tablet emitted a dazzling light when it was deformed, the impact force of the tablet could be used to produce the impact. Its specific principle was similar to that of a stamping machine. A gourd opening that gradually tightened inside the bullet was filled with a thin layer of stone tablet slices. When the bullet was fired, the expanding gas would directly squeeze the slices into the gourd opening. The principle was similar to that of a stamping machine. A gourd opening would be cut inside the bullet and a thin layer of tablet slices would be filled at the bottom. When the bullet was fired, the expanding gas would directly squeeze the slices into the gourd opening. With just a few words of explanation, the other party completely understood his intentions and readily agreed to it. Only one day later, a verification report was sent to Roland's desk. The results proved that the method was indeed feasible. After many attempts, the 20 or so bullets that had been successfully modified could all be seen with a clear flash, and the barrage left a clear trail of light in front of everyone. Roland could not help but feel excited. For a long time, the First Army's fortification tactics had always been a big weakness because they could not see where the bullets would land at night. Even if they used flares, it was still extremely difficult to achieve the shooting level in the dim light. In addition, this problem would only become more prominent if the machine guns were carried on the plane. Even on a cloudless day, the pilot would probably not know where the bullets had landed. If such a simple method could be used to indicate the target, it would undoubtedly be of great help to the upcoming battle of divine will. Moreover, the traditional tracer bullets would constantly consume the illuminant, which would cause the weight and center of gravity to change and eventually lead to the deviation of the trajectory. Therefore, when the tracer bullets were first introduced, there was a saying that, if the tracer bullets hit the target, it meant that the other bullets did not hit the target. However, the performance of the new tracer bullets was better than that of the traditional method. As long as the bullet body was slightly lengthened, the new tracer bullets would have the same flying characteristics as normal bullets. The only problem was how many stone tablets were available in the southernmost region. A week later, the two discoverers of the desert ruins arrived at the shallow beach harbor. In the reception hall, Roland asked them again about the wonders they had discovered under the water cave. Their answers were roughly the same as the contents of the report. Before encountering the giant armored scorpion, they had only explored a few hundred meters and knew nothing about what was behind the so-called stone tablet wall. In other words, the stone tablets they had seen were probably only a small part of it. After all, according to the murals, there should be a large number of corpses that could make blood flow into rivers. In addition, Simbady's description of the cave made him very concerned. The environment in the cave was like the Silver Stream oasis, and there was even the rumored extinct god's flower. If the once vast grassland had really degenerated into a desert after the departure of the three gods' emissaries, then the underground of the Endless Cape should be no exception. Perhaps there were some deviations in the rumors, or there were other mysteries hidden there. He couldn't wait to dig up the desert and have a look. After asking about the situation, Roland asked the fjord's man to stay alone. Your diving suit is very interesting, and the ruins you discovered are also worthy of being recorded in the annals of history. He slowly took a sip of tea. To be honest, I'm a little surprised to see that you can use the steam engine in a new invention. You should know that most people can't even use it after buying it. Without the guidance of the technicians sent by the factory, they can only stand on the side in a daze, let alone modify it. With this ability alone, you've already set one foot on the podium of a lifetime honorary explorer. Thank you for your compliment, Rex said excitedly. It took me half a year to figure out how to control it. If you need it, I can provide you with diving suits first, even at a discount. No, you misunderstand. I don't need your diving suit, Roland said with a smile. In fact, if I want to, I can make a better one. Rex blinked, as if he had not expected such a reply. He smiled awkwardly, as if trying to squeeze out a smile. Your Majesty. Roland interrupted him directly. You may think I'm bragging, but it doesn't matter. What I really want is, the Society of Wondrous Crafts. The other party could not help but be stunned. I don't understand what you mean. I know what you want to prove, and I can help you achieve it. Roland went straight to the point. There are two kinds of sages in the world, stargazing and alchemy. Putting the former aside, I think what you're doing is essentially the same as alchemy. Both are creating new things for human beings. So why can't the Society of Wondrous Crafts be the third kind of sages study, and establish a corresponding trade association? Rex's breath suddenly quickened. He suddenly realized the meaning of Roland's words. If someone else said this, he would only think it was nonsense or even mockery. Compared with the famous Alchemist Association and Stargazing Association, the Society of Wondrous Crafts was not worth mentioning at all. However, the King of Greycastle was different. Given his reputation and power, it was not impossible for him to do so. He swallowed and felt his throat become a little hoarse. Then, what's the price? Since Roland wanted to help the Society of Wondrous Crafts, it was impossible that he did not have any ulterior motives. All of this. What? Ahem, no, I mean, you'll work for me. Roland cleared his throat. You'll move to Neverwinter and become a member of Greycastle. All the research results will belong to me, including the right to sell and use. And you'll get honor, wealth, and a better research environment. Rex did not know how to answer. Although the things they created were despised and criticized, they were like their own children. Most people in the Society of Wondrous Crafts would not agree to give them to others. I know this needs to be considered carefully. Go back to your resting place and think about it. Roland stood up and pushed a book to him. Give me an answer in 3 days. Your Majesty, this is. Rex asked in confusion as he picked up the book. Chapter 1136. When Rex left the reception hall, he saw somebody waiting for him in the courtyard. What do you think? Is the great chief interested in your diving suit? Asked the Sand Nation enthusiastically. After a week of getting along, the two of them had become more familiar with each other and could be considered as half-friends. What's the reward for discovering the relic? The title of explorer. Rex shook his head disappointedly. He doesn't want to buy a diving suit. Well. I see, somebody said quickly. But it's normal that Greycastle Kingdom doesn't need it. When the news gets out, the Chamber of Commerce of the Fjords will definitely notice your invention. The sea is a treasure trove. That's what you said, isn't it? He did say that, Rex thought. Now that the King of Greycastle has summoned us, he obviously attached great importance to this matter. According to the terms of the recruitment, I will definitely be rewarded handsomely. Whether it was the reward itself or the title of explorer, it would attract a lot of attention and talk about him, thus making the diving suit famous throughout the Fjord Islands. However, he smiled bitterly and said, His Majesty's reward is a book. Somebody was stunned. What did you say? The Sand Nation lowered his head and looked at the book in Rex's hand. Is it? Yes, it's this. Rex nodded helplessly. The book was not thick and only had dozens of pages. There was not a single word on the cover, not to mention the exquisite borders and prints. Even if it was given by an ordinary noble, it still looked rather shabby and did not look like a decent reward. Such a reward would not bring him fame, and he might even be ridiculed. The chief shouldn't be like this. Somebody stamped his feet. Even I got 20 golden dragon as a reward. As the initiator of the salvage plan, you should get more than me. The straightforwardness of the Fjord's people warmed Rex's heart, but he knew in his heart that it was absolutely not worth questioning a powerful ruler over such a matter, because the other party had already given him the conditions to fulfill his wish, but he was still hesitating. At this time, a guard came over and said, His Majesty has prepared a residence for you. Please come with me. Thank you. He hurriedly bowed and signaled somebody to follow him. No matter what, it was better to go back and read the book first. Not long after he left the castle district, Rex suddenly heard a strange buzzing sound. It was like a series of muffled thunder coming from the horizon, but it was even clearer. He exclaimed softly and looked into the distance. A barely visible black dot appeared in the blue sky. Birds? Just as this thought popped up in his mind, he quickly denied it. The distance was probably a few miles. What kind of bird could fly with such momentum? The Sand Nation had also noticed this anomaly. His entire body tensed up like a soldier on high alert. During this time, he had made various hypotheses, ranging from ordinary biographies, eulogies, introductions to the customs of Neverwinter, a generous contract disguised as a book, and even a threatening notice to force the members of the Society of Wondrous Crafts to move to Neverwinter. But there was nothing. There was only one sentence on the first page, the law of buoyancy. An object immersed in a static fluid is subjected to a buoyant force equal to the weight of the fluid displaced by the object. The buoyant force is perpendicular to the center of the fluid displaced. It sounded awkward at first, but Rex's eyes gradually widened after he read it in his mind several times. He quickly turned to the second page, which turned out to be a full page of arithmetic formulas. Probably in consideration of his ability to understand, each formula was accompanied by detailed annotations. The more he read, the harder it was for him to take his eyes off it. Volume, density, buoyancy. He was familiar with these concepts, but at this moment, he felt like he was seeing them for the first time. Every word was no longer an abstract expression, but a number with a unit. Whether an object was sinking or floating, and to what extent it was sinking, Rex could calculate it with a pen. For a moment, Rex thought of the steel ships and hydrogen balloons sold to the fjords. They seemed to become vivid and vivid in his memory. Further down the page, there was a submersible that could sink and float autonomously. Although it was only a conceptual picture, it was undoubtedly feasible when combined with the formulas in front. At the end of the book, he saw a strange large ship, which could sail on the surface of the water like an ordinary ship, but could also swim underwater like a fish. Its huge body could accommodate hundreds of people. Even the most deadly wind and waves would not be a threat to it underwater. Rex was completely shocked by this idea. At the same time, he felt a sense of dullness in his heart. It was as if he had finally taken a small step on an unknown road, and just when he was feeling elated, someone had already pointed out the entire path. Thinking of the iron beast that had whizzed past, it seemed like there was more than one such path in Neverwinter. He had already understood the meaning of the word reward. If he rejected the King of Greycastle's offer, he would definitely be able to reach a new level in his diving career with the contents of this book. However, the second stage was already the limit of what an individual could achieve. As for the third stage of the diving ship, he basically had no chance in this lifetime. Chapter 1137. At the same time, in the eastern region of the swirling sea, a large fleet of ships formed into 5 columns and floated outside the Shadow Islands. The most eye-catching ship was the Snow Wind. Its black steel hull and billowing black smoke distinguished it from the rest of the ships. At this moment, the deck of the Snow Wind was bustling with activity. The sailors were running back and forth, making the final preparations for entering the islands. Thunder was on the bridge, explaining to the crew what to pay attention to. You're all the best explorers in the fjords, and many of you have come to the Shadow Seas before. So, I'll cut to the chase. The position of the islands is unpredictable, and there will be fog when the tide falls. So, you can't let your guard down at any time. Do you understand? Don't worry, boss. An adjutant patted his chest and said, "We've been with you for so many years. When have we ever made a mistake? It's the 4 major chambers of commerce that sent a large ship to follow us. If anything goes wrong, it'll be them." That's right. It's fine if it's just a few small ships, but a 3-masted ship is not a good choice to sail in the reefs. They probably think their ships are as agile as the Snow Wind. Don't expect us to turn around if we hit a reef. This caused everyone to burst into laughter. If they're worried that we'll hide our findings, why don't they just let the captain hitch a ride with us? Those chambers of commerce are clearly trying to gain a greater say in this expedition, Zhang Heng said. I told you it's not easy to get funding from them. But if we want to go further east, we have to have a large fleet. There's no other way. Looking at the noisy crowd, Camilla Derry sighed softly. During the nearly month-long voyage, she had gained a basic understanding of the Shadow Seas. It seemed to be the center of the swirling sea. Every tide rose and fell here, and it was also the most obvious part of the sea. The difference between the front and the back could even turn thousands of submerged reefs into an archipelago. The sleeping island was nothing compared to it. What was even more incredible was that the Shadow Islands had been discovered for more than 10 years, but there was still no accurate nautical chart. The reason was that the reefs here were not fixed. All the objects hidden in the water seemed to be constantly moving, including the huge ruins. If they wanted to cross the sea, they must wait until all the reefs were out of the water. It was precisely because of this that the difficulty of navigating it could be imagined. But the people in front of him didn't look like well-trained professionals at all. Instead, they looked more like fierce bandits. The identity of an explorer did have a good reputation among the people of the fjords, but she could not see this among her peers. Except for a few people like Thunder who could convince the masses, most of them were the masters of their own ways. Camilla, who used to be a noble, was naturally disgusted by such a chaotic scene. If it were not for Princess Tilly's request, she really did not want Joan to travel with them. While sighing, she found that she actually missed the first army of Neverwinter. At least they did not make a fuss like monkeys during a mission. No matter what, they always stood straight and in high spirits, which was always pleasing to the eye. Camilla suppressed the discomfort in her heart, left the bridge command room, and went to the rear deck of the steel ship. She immediately saw Joan, who was playing at the stern of the ship, and Margaret, who was by her side. Seeing Camilla, Joan immediately shrank behind Karina and looked at her with only half of her head. She had heard that Joan had been able to get along with many witches in Neverwinter and had even made friends with Maggie and Lightning. Camilla could not help but think, is it so difficult for me to be recognized? In terms of the time they had known each other, she could be considered the person who had interacted with him the most after Marjorie. Karina smiled. What's wrong? Are you in a bad mood? She pointed at the corner of her mouth. It's all over your face. No. Camilla was stunned. You don't like the atmosphere in the command room, do you? Marjorie seemed to know what was on Camilla's mind. I've already told you, let those men worry about the exploration. You just focus on enjoying the scenery on the sea and treat it as a trip. How can I do that? Camilla frowned. If I stay out of everything, won't I be putting my life in their hands? Don't you trust Thunder? Marjorie took Camilla's hand and walked to the railing. Your sense of responsibility is admirable. I think if not, Lady Tilly wouldn't have let you manage Sleeping Island. But sometimes, it's not bad to trust others. Not only Thunder, but also Lady Tilly. How can I not trust Her Highness Tilly? Camilla thought to herself, but found it difficult to refute. She had always disagreed with the idea of the witches moving to Neverwinter. Besides, staying on the sea for a long time will drive you crazy if you're always tense, Marjorie continued. Don't be fooled by the fact that they look like a bunch of uneducated bandits. They're really good at sailing. Camilla finally found a way to speak. I have to clarify that I didn't say that, but you think so, don't you? Karina's words soon made her speechless. Ha ha ha, it's nothing strange. The nobles of the Four Kingdoms see us as barbarians, just like we see the Sand Nation of the Majin Kingdom as barbarians. To be honest, I've only met one noble who doesn't discriminate at all, or the reason for discrimination has nothing to do with his family background. Roland Wimbledon. Although she did not want to admit it, that was the only name she could think of. After all, that person had publicly offered to help the witches as early as 4 years ago. Camilla had previously thought that he might have some ulterior motives, but now, that excuse no longer existed, because the witch he had saved had become the Queen of Greycastle. A little more, trust? Just when Camilla was silent, a faint muffled sound suddenly came from the distance, as if a huge wave was sweeping towards them, or as if countless schools of fish were tumbling restlessly on the surface of the sea. However, she knew it was just her illusion. At the moment, as far as she could see, the sea was still calm. The tide is starting to ebb, Marjorie said in a low voice. Ah. Joan nervously grabbed the corner of Karina's clothes. After a quarter of an hour, Camilla saw a change. A sharp stone emerged from the sea, followed by a second and a third. Rather than calling it an archipelago, it was more appropriate to call it a stone forest. They were slowly rising from the water and soon occupied a large area of the sea. When the water fell more than 5 meters, the thicker islands under the stone pillars gradually revealed themselves. Camilla could not help but hold her breath. It was the first time she had seen such an incredible scene. As the entire sea was falling, the sea line at the end of her vision floated, as if it had risen above the archipelago. But that was just a visual error. To be precise, it was a slope, the original sea line had become the top of the slope, while the shadow waters had become a slightly sloping slope. Even so, there were still no waves on the surface of the sea. If she covered her ears and looked back, it could still be described as calm. Chapter 1138. Woo, woo, woo. The snow wind also sounded its deep whistle at this moment. It was the signal to set sail. The 4 ships at the head of the column hoisted their sails, and separated themselves from the fleet. Crescent Moon Bay, Sunset Island, Shallow Water Town, Twin Dragon Island. The ships of the 4 chambers of commerce followed the snow wind, and sailed slowly toward the Shadow Sea. The clear view gradually became blurred, and the sunlight dimmed. Although they were only about a kilometer away, they felt like they had entered a completely different world. When the deck was shrouded in mist, Camilla felt the vibration of the ship stopped. What happened? Don't worry. The engine just stopped working. Margaret seemed to have seen through her doubts. The most important trick to sailing here is to be slow. If it's a small boat, it's fine. If it's a big boat, it's enough to glide along the water slope. Look behind. Camilla looked in the direction Marjorie was pointing. The sails of the ships of the Chamber of Commerce were lowered to half-mast, and some of the sails were facing each other, which was a scene that could never be seen on a normal sailing. In addition, there was a burning brazier set up in front and behind each ship to mark their position. But even so, she could only see the traces of 2 ships. The silhouette of the 3rd ship was completely hidden in the fog, and the weak flames were like flickering fireflies. The 4th ship seemed to have completely disappeared. Are we going downhill? Camilla asked suspiciously. After staying on Sleeping Island for a while, Camilla was no longer ignorant about the sea. When the high water swallowed the caves and cracks, whirlpools would appear on the surface of the water. The smaller whirlpools were as thick as a finger, while the bigger ones could be several meters long. In any case, the water would gather at the center of the whirlpool from all directions, and the closer they were to the end, the faster the water would gather. Camilla had thought that the sea was too vast to feel the changes in the current. However, now that the fleet had entered the depths of the Shadow Sea, it was strange that the water was still so calm. She even saw the algae floating on the surface of the water drifting out of the sea. This meant that the direction of the current had not changed at all. There was no sign of the current turning back, let alone converging at the bottom of the slope. It does look incredible, but it's the truth. Marjorie nodded. If the ebb tide was caused by a huge whirlpool, we wouldn't even think about exploring it. This was because a whirlpool that could affect the entire ocean was probably even deeper than the abyss of hell. Entering it would only lead to death. It's because it's so strange that Thunder wants to explore it. She paused and looked at Joan, who was gazing at the sea blankly. But there's a limit to our ability. It's almost impossible to dive to the bottom of the sea. It's because of your help that we can see hope. Having said that, Camilla felt a chill down her spine as she looked at the wet stone pillars and reefs around her. She could at least see the real shape of the rocks that were close by, but for the reefs that were further away, she could only see the dark shadows of different depths, just like the claws of a ghost in a nightmare. Cry. Fish. Red fish. Joan suddenly yelled. Camilla turned her head and saw a bright red river suddenly appearing on the right quarter of the snow wind. Although Thunder had told her about it, she was still shocked when she saw it with her own eyes. Ghost Shadow Red River. Ghost Shadow Red River. It was a special channel formed by a school of fish. Stop smacking your lips. Red-scaled fish don't taste good. Marjorie patted Joan's head. As long as we follow the Ghost Shadow Red River, we'll reach the ruins of the triangular tower. Princess Tilly must have told you that there's a strange instrument in the ruins that looks like a telescope. Through it, we can see a vast continent that we've never seen before. That's our final destination. She did tell me about it. It's a pity that our current destination has nothing to do with the ancient ruins. Otherwise, you would be able to experience the magnificence and wonder of the ruins, Karina said regretfully. No. I'd better not, Camilla said decisively. If she could, she would never set foot in this sea again. Your reaction is completely different from Princess Tilly's, Marjorie said, covering her mouth with her hand and laughing. After sailing for about 2 hours, the Snow Wind stopped beside a large reef, followed by the 3-masted ships of the 4 major chambers of commerce. After the ships were anchored, the people in charge of the 4 major chambers of commerce gathered on the deck of the flagship. No one is missing, the adjutant of the Snow Wind said, twitching his mouth. I thought you would drive the ship onto a reef and cry for help. You're not the only good captains and sailors. The people of the 4 major chambers of commerce would not pretend that they did not hear that. The steel ships are good, but the people on them are not. That's enough. Thunder interrupted the argument. It's already the best result that we can get here safely. Did we encounter any danger on the way? No, the people in charge of the chambers of commerce said. It was very quiet this time. We didn't even encounter a single sea ghost. I thought it was strange too. Usually, 1 or 2 unlucky people would be dragged into the water by the sea ghosts. Or did we choose a route that avoided the ancient ruins and those monsters prefer to use the ruins as their nests? That sounds reasonable. Thunder pondered for a moment and then waved his hand to silence the people. If that's the case, let's not waste any more time. The ebb tide will last until evening, so we'd better go to the bottom of the sea before then. If we don't find anything, we must leave before the tide rises. Otherwise, we'll be trapped in the archipelago. He looked at the 2 witches and said, Joan, Lady Camilla, I'll leave the rest to you. Yeah. Joan nodded seriously. As long as you can shut them up. Camilla glanced at the explorers grumpily. Just to be clear, I need to concentrate when I'm communicating telepathically. If anyone interrupts me, don't blame me for not doing it again. After receiving Thunder's promise, Camilla put her hand on Joan's shoulder and closed her eyes. After a moment of dizziness, another image appeared in front of her. It was Joan's vision. Go, Camilla said in her heart. If the communication is interrupted or you encounter any danger, you must come back immediately. Do you understand? Don't force yourself. Your friends are waiting for you. When Camilla mentioned the word, friends, she clearly felt a slight tremble in Joan's heart. Then, she became determined. Got it. Joan then jumped back into the sea. A cool and comfortable feeling immediately enveloped Camilla. Her fatigue seemed to have been swept away. However, she knew it was just an illusion. It was Joan who felt comfortable, not herself. She shared Joan's happiness. How is it? Thunder asked. Everything is going well. The depth is about 50 meters, Camilla replied. The stone pillars don't seem to be getting thicker, and even the islands and reefs. I don't see anything like the seabed or underwater mountains. They're all separated. This was her task. Although Joan could move freely under the water, she could not accurately describe what she saw. If she wanted to know what Joan saw, she had to use the ability of mind resonance. The depth is over 100 meters, the light is obviously dimmer, but the scene is still very clear. The stone pillars and the islands are still there, and there's no sign of an end, Camilla muttered in a low voice. Damn it, they're too long. Maybe the reefs that look like islands aren't real islands, but... But what? Someone asked. Chapter 1139. The swirling sea is so vast, so it's understandable that there are all kinds of strange terrains. After a moment of silence, Thunder said, I once saw a weathered rocky mountain in the kingdom of Wolfheart. It's somewhat similar to these stone pillars, except that it's not as long and slender. But there's no wind underwater. Camilla thought but did not say it out loud. Wind? Joan's voice suddenly came to her mind. It's windy here. What did you say? Camilla asked subconsciously. Well, did I not make myself clear enough? Thunder coughed twice. Then I'll say it again. When I was in the kingdom of Wolfheart, I'm not asking you, I'm asking Joan. Camilla interrupted. Although it was a little rude, she was too shocked to care about it. Joan just said, there's wind at the bottom of the sea. All the listeners on the deck could not help but be stunned. I can't feel it, but I can hear the sound of the wind. Whoosh, 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 don't you hear it? Yes, it was a telepathic communication. If Joan could hear it, he should be able to hear it as well. Camilla hurriedly concentrated. Sure enough, there was a faint sound of wind coming from the bottomless sea under Joan's feet, as if air currents were passing through a cave. I'll go down a little more, said Joan, but in a different position. After saying that, she untied the laces on her skirt and let her legs come into close contact with the seawater. Green scales quickly emerged from her ankles and wrapped around her legs, a fish-shaped tail. In an instant, Camilla felt as if the resistance and sluggishness in front of her had disappeared. With just a wave of her tail, her body had darted far away in the water. She was even more agile than a fish. This was Cheong's real appearance. His diving speed instantly increased. 200 meters. The sound of the wind seems to be getting louder. There's still no change in the water. 400 meters, it's completely dark. Fortunately, Joan doesn't rely on light to see. The stone pillars are still extending downwards, and new pillars are appearing. The rope used to fix the depth has reached its end. Can you connect a few more sections? Damn it, how deep is it now? 600 or 800? Joan couldn't be sure either. If it's the stone pillar, at this point, Camilla, who had been narrating the situation, suddenly froze. No, how is this possible? What happened? Thunder quickly asked. The chief butler of Sleeping Island felt an indescribable chill rise from his back and spread to his whole body. The pillar, is gone. Gone? Do you mean disappeared? Thunder frowned and looked at the sea. The dense islands and reefs around them had not changed at all. No matter how he looked at them, they did not seem to have disappeared. Camilla held her trembling hands and said, there is no seabed, there is nothing. They are floating in the sea. Everyone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. In Joan's vision, she clearly saw that the pillars had reached their ends. However, it did not mean that they had a fulcrum. Instead, they stopped abruptly as if their ends had been cut off, leaving only their upper halves floating in the water. Not only the small stone pillars, but even the islands and reefs were the same. The huge stone blocks stood in the air without any support. This scene was too strange, and it completely defied common sense. Floating? Do you mean the islands are all floating in the water? 3 gods above, they're all rocks. Woman, are you sure? Impossible. Even if they can float, they can't be as still as they are now. Without the anchors, the current is enough to push the entire Shadow Islands into the fjords. The deck suddenly burst into an uproar. All of you, shut up! Thunder shouted, causing the others to calm down. Are all the islands floating? I don't know. They are of different lengths, Camilla murmured. The new stone pillars are still extending downward. Joan's speed of diving had obviously slowed down. Apparently, although her ability could resist the pressure of the deep sea, there was still a limit. Just then, Camilla noticed a strange scene. A few of the pillars closer to Cheong seemed to have been elongated. It was not their overall length, they were almost as straight as tree trunks, plunging deeper into the sea. She could not see the end of them at all. What caught her attention were the details, such as the lines on the pillars and the barnacles attached to them. Starting from one of the pillars, the former seemed to be more slender, while the latter gradually turned from a circle to an oval. Since there were normal specimens within a few meters of them, it was quite incongruous. Do you want to take a closer look? Joan sensed Camilla's surprise. There is something strange over there. Okay. Camilla cleared her dry throat. Be careful. Joan slowly swam to the nearest stone pillar and reached out her hand to touch the strange barnacles. But the next moment, something creepy happened. The chief butler saw with his own eyes that the finger covered with scales grew a little longer. Huh? What's going on? Joan reached out her hand and opened it again in confusion. Is it my illusion? Camilla suddenly had a bad premonition. Just as she was about to inform Thunder to stop the dive, a fish swam under Joan's eyelids. It was an ordinary silver eel, about an arm's length. But when it swam past the mermaid, its body grew at a speed visible to the naked eye. In less than 5 meters, it turned from an eel into a creature that looked like a sea snake. But this was not the end. Its sinking speed continued to accelerate, and after a few breaths of time, the silver light eel was suddenly stretched to its limit. Its tail was still in sight, but its head had already plunged into the boundless darkness. It was at least 100 meters long. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared into the deep sea like a stream of light, as if it had been sucked in by something. Camilla felt her scalp tingle and her hair stand on end. She could not help but shout, "Get out of there! The search is over. Come up immediately." But it was too late. Joan swayed her tail a few times, but her body did not move. Or rather, the speed at which she was stretching was the same as the speed at which she was rising. Camilla could clearly see that her tail had grown to more than 10 meters long, but its width did not change at all. It was a horrifying scene. Joan began to panic. What's wrong with me? Camilla, what should I do? Come on. Don't stop, swim harder. You can do it. Camilla hissed. But all her efforts were in vain. No matter how hard Joan swam, her body kept sinking as if she had sunk into a swamp. At this moment, not only her tail, but even her body and hands were distorted. She seemed to realize something and helplessly stretched out her arms above her head. Somebody, help me, no. Before she could finish her words, her vision suddenly sank and then turned pitch black. Camilla opened her eyes and knelt on the ground helplessly. Sweat dripped from the tip of her nose and dripped on the back of her hand. Only then did she realize that she was covered in cold sweat. What's going on? Is Joan in danger? Thunder came up to her and helped her up. Chapter 1140. It seemed like a long time had passed, but it also seemed like a short moment. Joan saw her body stretching infinitely toward the dark bottom of the sea until a white light spot appeared at the end of her vision. Then, the light spot turned into a dazzling light that enveloped her. The next moment, the feeling of a body that did not belong to her came back to her consciousness. The roaring sound of the water almost broke her ears. The tranquility of the deep sea was instantly shattered. She felt as if she had been sucked into a whirlpool. But she quickly rejected this idea. A whirlpool would only revolve around the center, but here, there was a rapid flow of water in all directions. It was the collision of these water currents that caused such a loud sound. Even Joan could not keep her balance in such a situation. Everything was out of control. She was like a feather floating in the stormy waves. She could only let the water flow around her, crashing left and right. Where am I? Although she could not figure it out, she knew that she was not in the depths of the sea. Her scales did not feel too much pressure, and the water was no more than 100 meters deep, which meant that she would soon surface. Besides, no matter how hard Joan called out to Camilla in her mind, she could not get any response. This made her desperate to get out of the current predicament. Even if she could not control herself, she had to at least float to the surface and have a look. Fortunately, it was much easier to float than to change direction. She tried her best to raise her head and slowly rose up in the surging currents. The moment she jumped out of the water, Joan opened her eyes wide in confusion. The shadow islands had disappeared without a trace. There were rocks all around her and above her head. The vast sea had turned into a waterway hundreds of meters long. The seawater flowed rapidly in it, rumbling. The wind was blowing above the water, so strong that it was almost impossible to open one's eyes. The whistling sound overlapped with the sound of the wind at the bottom of the sea. Just as she turned her head around, she saw a bright light behind her. The water rushed toward the source of the light, as if it had found a vent. Was she going to have to go through the same thing again? Before she could think further, Joan was pushed into the light by the unstoppable seawater. The roaring suddenly quieted down, as if she was a lot farther away from the light. For a moment, she felt that she was flying. Her body became light as a feather and did not feel real at all. But soon, she realized that she was indeed in the sky. Beneath her feet was the familiar blue ocean, but it was 1,000 meters away. The surrounding rocks were replaced by the sky. The light she saw came from the sun hanging high above the clouds, and the seawater that carried her out of the cave had become a wide waterfall. But, she was neither Maggie nor lightning. She couldn't fly. Just as this thought appeared in his mind, his body suddenly fell. Plop! After a frightening fall from the sky, Joan fell headfirst into the sea. If he hadn't seen a similar scene in the magic movie, he would have been scared to death. She swam out of the water again and let out a long breath. That's right, I was clearly in the deep sea just now. How did I suddenly get washed up into the sky? At this thought, Joan looked up and froze on the spot. God, what is that? She could hardly believe her eyes. An incomparably huge boulder floated in midair. It was so huge that it was impossible to see its entire appearance. The shadow cast by the boulder covered half of the sea like a dark cloud in the sky. Some of the clouds were even below the boulder, which gave people the illusion that it was not an isolated giant, but the top of a mountain. However, even the impassable mountain range was not majestic in front of the boulder. Joan estimated that the boulder was at least 100 meters thick, which was like a large island. There were many cracks on the thick boulder, ranging from hundreds of meters to a few kilometers. Seawater poured out of the cracks, forming a waterfall that connected the sky and the sea. Such a large amount of water poured into the boulder, stirring up huge waves on the surface of the sea. Even Lord Thunder had never seen such a shocking spectacle, right? Although Joan did not know where she was sure that she was far away from the fjords and Grey Castle. Otherwise, such a huge boulder would have been discovered a long time ago. Can I go back? In the turbulent waves, Joan put half of her head into the water and spat out a string of bubbles. Plop! Just then, she heard the sound of something falling into the water not far away. It sounded like something had fallen from above. Are there other people who were unfortunately involved? Joan estimated the distance, dived into the water, and swam in that direction. After swimming for about a quarter of an hour, she finally got a good look at the thing that had fallen into the water. It was an oddly shaped boat, about the size of a 3-masted ship. The lower half seemed to be a cross between a fish and a squid, and the upper half was a frame of curved ribs, wrapped in flesh that looked like internal organs. At first glance, it looked like the body of an animal that had been half-eaten, and she could not help but feel a little nauseous. However, it was definitely not an inanimate object. Soon after falling into the water, it spread its 4 pelvic fins and began to paddle in the direction of the spreading waves. Joan followed the direction of the boat and was shocked. In the distance, there were hundreds of such monsters. They lined up neatly in several rows, half hidden in the waves. They looked like a huge fleet. After the newly fallen one joined the fleet slowly sailed to the east. Joan only breathed a sigh of relief when they completely disappeared from the horizon. What should I do next? Since the monster boat had fallen from the floating land above, there might be other strange enemies nearby. Although Joan had never seen such a monster, her intuition told her not to approach it. Ever since she had awakened as a witch, her intuition had never been wrong. Don't force yourself. Your friends are still waiting for you to go back. Lady Camilla's words flashed in Joan's mind. Then the voices and smiles of Lightning, Maggie, and Sister Lorgar appeared in her mind one by one. She wanted to go back. She had never had such a strong desire in her life. She wanted to go back to Neverwinter, the place where she had made so many friends during the winter. She wanted to go back to her friends. Ah! Joan shouted as if to encourage herself. She identified the direction and swam to the west. No matter how wide the sea was, there was always a boundary. Moreover, Lightning had said that the world they lived in was spherical. As long as she kept swimming in one direction, she would definitely see her friends in the exploration group again. Definitely. The fleet has to go. Thunder looked at Camilla Derry, who was leaning against the fence. The Shadow Islands isn't the end of our journey. We'll consume a lot of water every day we stay here. It's already the third day. If we go on like this, we'll lose control of the fleet. But... Camilla looked haggard. Joan hasn't come back yet. It's not your fault. Thunder patted her on the shoulder. Besides, it won't get any better if we keep waiting. Do you remember what you said? There are only two possibilities for the spiritual connection to be cut off. One is that the other party is dead, and the other is too far away. If you don't want to believe the first possibility, then you shouldn't stay here. You mean, go to the east of the Celine to find her? To be honest, the possibility is slim, but it's better than waiting here. Thunder said patiently, don't forget that Joan isn't an ordinary person. An ordinary sailor will die after falling into the water, but Joan won't. She's lived in the sea for more than 10 years. She can survive without us. I see. Camilla bit her lip. Then I'll go to the Celine with you. No, Thunder interrupted her. You're not in the right state of mind for the next exploration. And I promised His Majesty that no matter what the result is, I'll let you return to Neverwinter immediately after exploring the Shadow Islands. We still need your ability to fight against the demons. Besides, His Majesty is the only one who knows what happened to Cheong in the sea. Your information is crucial. He paused and looked at her solemnly. We all have our own responsibilities. It's the mature thing to do. Camilla closed her eyes sadly. 2 hours later, the snow wind sounded its whistle. The fleet, which had been waiting for a long time, set sail and sailed to the eastern sea. One of the ships broke away from the fleet, turned around, and headed back in the opposite direction. Chapter 1141. At the front of Tower Station number 9 on the Fertile Plains. The target is 6 degrees 4 minutes northeast from here, 6,500 meters away. This area, requesting for artillery coverage. Lying on Maggie's back, Sylvie looked down at the ground not far away. The turf on the ground had been turned over and the soil was still fresh. It seemed that the turf had been turned over in the last 2 or 3 days. Yes, Shavi replied briefly through the sigil of listening. We'll start the bombardment in 5 minutes. Then she added, please be careful. Sylvie could not help looking in the direction of Tequila. At this height, she could already see the ruins of the holy city with her naked eyes. Although it was still more than 50 kilometers away and looked smaller than a fingernail, it gave her a feeling that it was close at hand. The outline of the collapsed city blended with the woods like a forgotten miniature sculpture. Although it was beyond the observation range of the eye of magic, she could still feel a shining red star flashing. As long as it did not move, they were still temporarily safe. Yes, I know. She put away the sigil and patted Maggie's broad back. Let's fly higher. Ow! Maggie, who had transformed into a devil beast, let out a long howl and spread her giant wings that were nearly 10 meters long. She was now almost the size of 2 ordinary devil beasts, which made her a giant among the devil beasts. She was even comparable to the mutant devil beast ridden by Caberdabi. But when she thought that Maggie was still a giant among pigeons, Sylvie felt relieved. After climbing for about 100 meters, she faintly heard the dull sound of thunder behind her. Then, several dust columns rose from the ground in front of her. She could clearly see the ripples around the columns. Wherever the dust column passed, grass was sent flying, as if the solid ground had turned into clear water. No matter how many times she watched this scene, it was always pleasing to the eye. Then came the second and third round of thunder. The artillery battalion was able to accurately shoot shells into the area she had marked. Since it was difficult to determine the specific area of the attack from the air, they usually used a rough estimate instead. This area was about the size of the castle district of Neverwinter, which was about 16,400 square meters. It was also one of the areas she was most familiar with. Under the cover of the artillery fire, it did not take long for Sylvie to see severed limbs flying in the dust column. A 152mm grenade was enough to create a 1-meter-deep crater, but the demons could not hide deeper than 50 centimeters, and that was on the ground that had been corroded by the red mist. If it was an ordinary ground, it would at most cover his head. If a shell happened to land on his head, not even a complete corpse would be left. Of course, it wasn't necessary for a grenade to hit accurately to kill a demon. The shockwaves released by the grenade were the real killer, especially for targets buried underground. His body was tightly attached to the soil, which meant that there was no buffer. Any impact within 20 meters of the center of the explosion would be fatal. His Majesty called this method of attacking, which did not care about the specific position of the enemy, but bombarded the entire area. After 5 rounds of artillery fire, hundreds of demons crawled out of the soil and began to flee. The enemy has appeared. It's a mad demon. Please continue firing at the same angle, Sylvie reported. Roger. All of a sudden, she seemed to have sensed something and raised her head to look at Tequila. The red starlight suddenly became much brighter, and it quickly flew towards the camp. She immediately took out another sigil of listening and said, "Lightning, come back. The magic slayer is on the move." Maggie also turned around and quickly retreated from the airspace. 7 minutes later, the 3 of them returned to the air defense circle of the First Army. The magic slayer was also within the range of the magic eye. Sylvie saw the blue-skinned demon, which resembled a human, hovering above the bombardment area twice. It then stared coldly at the 3 of them in the air with a murderous look on its face. During this time, the artillery battalion did not stop firing. Sylvie realized that the magic slayer could not do anything even though he was angry. Even the powerful magic slayer could not stop the whistling shells from killing his own kind. In the end, the magic slayer could only abandon the fleeing mad demons and turn around to return. Sylvie immediately felt a lot less pressured. It's gone. Shall we go and scout again? Maggie shouted. She glanced at Lightning, who was clenching her fists tightly, and finally shook her head. Let's call it a day. I need to conserve some magic power for tonight. Besides, we've already swept the area within 5 to 6 kilometers. It's enough to ensure the safety of the engineering team for the next few days. After returning to the underground command center of Station Number 9, Sylvie painted a piece of land on the map green. It was the area that they had swept today. Almost all the areas along the railway were green. Thank you. The light of dawn came up to her with a cup of black tea. It seems that Lady Edith's banishment plan worked. Sylvie took the tea and said with a smile, "Yes, it seems so for now." This was not the first time she had encountered such an encounter. In fact, ever since they were within 100 kilometers of Tequila, the risk of scouting ahead had increased significantly. Using the magic eye to observe through the soil made it difficult for her to keep track of the enemy in the air. Within this distance, the demons could already stay in the air for a long time with a lot of gas tanks. Therefore, the General Staff formulated a banishment plan, dividing the reconnaissance area into several layers. The area within 0 to 2 kilometers was the absolute safety zone. Every corner of this area had been scanned by the magic eye, and the station would be on alert at all times. It was unlikely that they would be ambushed. Within this distance, the air defense team could leave the trenches and provide a wider protection circle. The area within 2 to 10 kilometers was the screening area, which was within the attack range of the Longsong cannons. It was also the main airspace for Sylvie and Maggie. After a clean sweep, the area would be considered relatively safe and marked in green on the map. The area within 10 to 50 kilometers was the danger zone. Lightning was the only one there to scout. Her purpose was to find the enemies hiding in the clouds and warn them in advance. This was equivalent to buying time for Maggie and Sylvie to retreat. Only Lightning was capable of getting rid of the enemy at this distance. Even the Magic Slayer could not catch up with a witch who could reach the speed of sound. The banishment plan had proved to be effective. The reconnaissance team could decide when to attack, and the enemy could only passively intercept them. Without the cooperation of the ground troops, the devil beasts alone could hardly cause any damage to the armored train at the front line. The core concept of the plan was to gradually turn the screening area into a safe zone, remove the demon spies, and banish the most threatening Magic Slayer from the battlefield. This way, the Magic Slayer would not be able to catch the reconnaissance team despite his strength. It would be even better if they could make the Magic Slayer lose his mind and force him to charge at the front line. The only pity was that the Magic Slayer had not shown any signs of losing control. By the way, Sylvie said as she looked around. "Where's Miss Pearl of the Northern Region?" She received His Majesty's order and boarded the Seagull with Iron Axe to return to Neverwinter, Philin replied with a smile. "I think it's about time." Chapter 1142. In Greycastle, City of Neverwinter. Roland received the Commander-in-Chief of the First Army, Iron Axe, and the Minister of the General Staff, Edith Kant. How did it go? How did it feel to ride the Seagull for the first time? Roland looked at his two subordinates with great interest. Your Majesty, although it flies very fast, for me, it's a little too exciting, Iron Axe said with a rare look of fear on his face. Iron Axe showed a rare look of palpitation on his face. I didn't feel it when I was watching from the side, but when I sat in it myself, I found that it was a little shaky. Especially when I was going up and down, I always felt that there was nothing under my buttocks. I didn't have any confidence. He then straightened his back and saluted Roland, gritted his teeth, and said loudly, "Of course, I'll try my best to overcome this. Please rest assured, Your Majesty." So, this experienced Majin warrior has a slight fear of heights? Roland could not help raising his eyebrows. How are you going to overcome it? When the war comes to an end, I'll watch the magic movie whenever I have time until I get used to it. That's really the style of the Sand Nation. Roland twitched the corner of his mouth and turned to Edith. What about you? The Pearl of the Northern Region licked her lips and said after a while, "Great." And that's it? Roland waited for a long time but did not hear anything else. He looked at Edith in confusion, only to find that her cheeks were slightly flushed and her eyes were shining with an indescribable emotion. Well, Roland sighed. My subordinates are a little different from ordinary people in some ways. He had expected to see their shocked or emotional expressions, and then they would praise him for his extraordinary creation, but it seemed that he had overthought it. Now that you're back, let's go to the meeting room. Roland stood up. It's time to make the final preparations for the war. After nearly 6 months of construction and advancement, the first main railway on the fertile plains was less than 60 kilometers away from the Tequila ruins. When the construction of Tower Station No. 10 was completed, the First Army would be able to launch a direct attack on the enemies there. The manpower and resources invested in Project Torch far exceeded that of any military operation in the past 4 years. More than 80% of the steel produced in the furnace area was turned into rails. There was only one strategic goal, and that was to eliminate the possibility of the demons erecting the obelisk before the arrival of the bloody moon. Once the fertile plains were covered by the red mist, it meant that the demons could cross the impassable mountain range and invade the interior at any time. Not only would the battle line be greatly extended, but the First Army would also have to face enemies who were no longer limited by distance. For humans who were outnumbered, this was definitely not an ideal start. On the contrary, if they could conquer Tequila first, the demons could only choose the gods' stone mines in the other two holy cities to grow their obelisks. Starfall City and Arietta were closer to the north of the plains. Even if they built strongholds there, they would not be able to directly threaten the four kingdoms. In this way, not only would the Battle of Divine will be within their grasp, but they would also be able to buy at least another 400 years for the human race. As for Greycastle, which had entered the industrial age, how much could it develop in 400 years? The answer was self-evident as to how many times human beings, who were not limited by the food shortage, could develop in 400 years. Therefore, the vast and fertile plains served as a strategic buffer and reserve land for future development. Mortals would eventually defeat the demons. However, this did not mean that their generation would be able to witness the arrival of that day. This was also the deeper reason why Roland did not tell the others. Unfortunately, the reality was not always as perfect as the plan. According to the original plan, as long as the demons in Tequila were eradicated and the ruins were rebuilt into a stronghold, it would be considered a great success. If this was the goal, the First Army was now only one step away from complete victory. However, the appearance of the Magic Slayer forced a change in the plan. The power of the curse rendered all healing methods ineffective, so small wounds could be fatal. Lightning's self-healing ability was basically equivalent to the speed of infection, but Leaf was not so lucky. According to Ash's secret observation and report, Leaf's condition was deteriorating. Although she did not say anything, her complexion and spirit could not be hidden from Ash's, who was always by her side. Deteriorating meant that the speed at which the wounds were decaying had exceeded the limit of healing. Like a lesion that was spreading little by little, it seemed to be fine at first, but in the end, the body would collapse. Whether it would take a year or a decade, as the most important part of the population expansion, this was an unacceptable loss. They had to put an end to the Magic Slayer in Tequila. In the conference room, the witches and the representatives of the army gathered together. The light screen from the third border city was displayed on the wall. They were discussing how to ensure the death of the senior demon with the power of the curse in the final battle. First of all, according to the General Staff's deduction, when the situation becomes unsalvageable, the Magic Slayer has a 90% chance of retreating, said Edith. Edith was still the first one to speak. There's not much concrete evidence for this conclusion. It's more of an expectation than anything else. Judging from the fact that it's still keeping a considerable distance from us, it should be the opposite of Caberdabi. I agree with this conclusion, said Alethea, who had dealt with the demons the most. Being fearless doesn't mean that they will die for no reason. In this respect, they're just like us. A senior demon is much more useful than an ordinary mad demon, so it's unlikely that he will die with his subordinates. So we have to take the initiative and intercept the Magic Slayer on his way out. Edith nodded. Fortunately, we know the Magic Slayer's whereabouts very well, and we've experienced this before. She looked at Andrea Quinn and said, if the Magic Slayer doesn't notice it, sniping him from a long distance is undoubtedly the safest and most reliable choice. Andrea ran her fingers through her hair gracefully. I have a question, Tilly said. Go ahead, Your Highness, the Pearl of the Northern Region said with a hand on her chest. First, we don't know whether we can kill the Magic Slayer with a single bullet. What if we can only injure him? We don't have a second chance. Second, what if the Magic Slayer has already noticed the long-range weapon and is trying to avoid it when he retreats? Based on our previous battles, this is not a small possibility. After all, the Magic Slayer's understanding of firearms has far exceeded our expectations. We've also considered these two questions, Edith replied. As for the first question, the General Staff has come to the conclusion that we should use God's Stones of Retaliation as bullets. A God's Stone bullet? Yes, even if it's not fatal, the Magic Slayer will still lose his ability to fly. Of course, I know that the smaller the God's Stone, the harder it will be. A God's Stone that can be cut to the size of an ordinary bullet can be directly smashed by a hammer, so it won't be able to withstand the pressure when it is shot out of the chamber. However, Miss Andrea's weapon is of a different caliber, so perhaps we can give it a try. She paused for a moment and then said, also, I've confirmed with Miss Agatha that the god's stone melted with magic blood will be much stronger. She came back with 2 bottles of fresh blood collected from demons, and she should be doing some experiments now. Using demons' blood to make a weapon that can kill them? I like that idea. Aletheia smiled. Yes, you're the second mortal that I find interesting. The Pearl of the Northern Region replied with a nonchalant smile. As for the second question, we need a backup troop to fill in the gap. At present, only lightning is faster than the Magic Slayer, Vendi said worriedly. But she can't stop the Magic Slayer. No. She shook her head. There's something faster than the Magic Slayer, something? Tilly seemed to realize something. Chapter 1143. And the people on the plain are God's punishment witches? Exactly. The anti-magic field works just as well as the God's stone. A dozen God's punishment witches should be able to hold off or even kill the enemy. Even if they can't, the sniper team can rush over and give them the final blow, the Pearl of the Northern Region said bluntly. Of course, it won't be easy. How we do it depends on the enemy's actions, but at least we're not completely helpless. I personally think the success rate is not low. After all, the enemy has seen bullets, but has never seen the seagull. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed that an ordinary person could fly into the sky. Roland immediately understood the general staff's plan. Indeed, it was not safe to rely solely on the sniper team. If the enemy discovered that the patrolling devil beasts had a long-range, accurate weapon, they would definitely make some countermeasures when they retreated. For example, they would keep flying in a different direction, or lower their altitude to escape. Even Andrea would not be able to do anything about it. She could find the coin that was bound to stand, but the coin that was bound to stand did not necessarily exist. In this case, someone had to step forward to fill in the gap. In addition to being faster than the Magic Slayer, the pursuer had to be as strong as the Magic Slayer. Theoretically, there was no such person among the witches. However, the general staff had thought of using a glider and a group of God's punishment witches to achieve the same effect. It was a clever way to save the country. The seagull could hide in the sky and turn altitude into speed when needed. After a period of accumulation of kinetic energy, the seagull could easily exceed 500 km per hour and catch up with the fleeing demon. However, this plan is probably the best we can do at the moment, but I don't think Ashes will agree. After all, it's more dangerous than the front line, and we might even encounter the Magic Slayer. Roland looked at Tilly. So, I'll convince her, Tilly said after a moment of silence. I'm going. Your Highness. Vendi said anxiously. At this moment, Roland could vaguely guess the mood of the person in charge of the Witch Union. If anything happened to him, only Anna and Tilly could maintain their status as witches. One was the legitimate queen, and the other was the legal heir of the bloodline. As long as the two of them were there, they could firmly stabilize the various forces, so Vendi certainly did not want to see any accidents. If you think about it, what we're doing is no different from transporting witches. By the time the Magic Slayer realizes the existence of Seagull, the Sisters of Tequila will have forced him into a corner. Hence, the risks are manageable. Tilly smiled. Don't worry. I'm not an idiot like Ashes. I won't do anything beyond my capabilities. Is it? That's right, Your Majesty. Celine smiled and said, the parts in the magic cube are the new parts that I've replicated. The fact that it can function normally means that those parts are working. I wonder if you're satisfied with this breakthrough. That's amazing. Roland held her tentacles in surprise as if he was admiring a precise knife. It's only been 3 months. I thought it would take me a year or even longer. The sleeping spell's thin wrist has helped me a lot, and the structure of the magic cube is much simpler than the magic core. Celine let him look at her for a while and then withdrew her auxiliary tentacles, feeling a little embarrassed. I think I need several thousand pieces for the experiment. I think I can make a replica with 500 pieces of similar materials. The garrison at the festive harbor should be acting according to my order. I think we'll hear from them soon, Roland said excitedly. If he could successfully replicate the magic cube, it might bring another round of earth-shaking changes to Neverwinter like the steam engine. If that's the case, can I ask for a reward? Celine suddenly changed the topic and said with a hint of expectation, of course, all this is for the advancement of the research in the future. What do you want? Roland asked curiously. In a place that ordinary people could not see, there was a force that was changing it, as if the dream world had its own consciousness. The never-before-seen memories, the old red-covered book, and the note inside the book were all proof of the changes. Ever since he had read the book, Raison d'être, Roland had been very interested in the name of the Rose Café. However, no matter how he searched the internet or how the witches searched the streets, he could not find any clues. There were a total of 46 cafes in the city, but none of them was called Rose Café. He had considered the possibility that it was a prank, but as he learned more about the real world, he found that the content in the book became more and more difficult to ignore. Even the note seemed to have a deeper meaning. The aliens that had completely disappeared. The war that had not broken out for the first time. The unstoppable awakening and erosion. All of this seemed to be similar to the real world, especially the discovery of the battle between the Radiation Clan and the Matchstick Man, which made the content in the book even more familiar. What puzzled him the most was why a book created in the dream world could vaguely correspond to the real world and also use the words, Battle of Divine Will. Unfortunately, according to Garcia, the author of the book did not leave any information behind, so the only clue was the note. However, before he found the Rose Café, he could only bury his doubts in his heart. He returned to the living room and waited until it was about 8 o'clock when he heard a rhythmic knock on the door. Bang, bang, bang. This was the signal to indicate that there was no one in the corridor. Roland hurriedly opened the door and let the person who knocked on the door in. Your Majesty, good morning. 3 petite witches raised their elbows and saluted him. One of them was Donnan, the lightless curtain, who was the first to enter the dream world. They are really high school students. Roland could not help thinking. He knew Donnan very well. She had joined the Blessed Army the second year after her awakening and was already 28 years old when her soul was transformed. She had rich combat experience and was good at using short knives, daggers, and other weapons to sneak into battle. However, because of her small size and the special magic power that could slow down the aging process, she looked no different from a young girl in her teens. The other 2 witches also looked the same. He could not help but think of the conversation he had with Celine. Go to school. I remember that the average age of a god's punishment which is above 20, right? According to this age group, the corresponding college is a university, but their level of knowledge is only around that of a junior high school student. If their age does not match, I'm afraid that their identity may be exposed. Don't worry about that,